Chapter 448. Longsong Stronghold was located on a tributary of the Redwater River, and the whole city was divided into two parts by the river. Most of the residents lived on the west bank, while the east bank was a compact farmland. Unlike other big cities that set farmland in the suburbs, the towering walls of Longsong Stronghold surrounded the residential areas and some farmland. It was not so much to resist the demonic beasts, but to prevent the attack of the same kind. Even if the city was surrounded by the enemy, Longsong Stronghold would not be cut off from supplies. Because of this, the outer wall of Longsong Stronghold was cut off at the entrance of the river. Several thick iron ropes hung between the two sections of the wall. If the enemy intended to attack Longsong Stronghold through the Redwater River, as long as the hemp ropes were cut, the iron chains would slide into the river. However, the Western Territory was rarely attacked by the fleet, so the iron chains were almost never used, and this time was no exception. Roland's fleet moved as fast as lightning, and by dusk, the outline of the walls of Longsong Stronghold could be seen. The smoke of the beacon still floated above the city, adding a bit of ink to the gradually darkening sky. The enemy is mainly concentrated in the area of the Lord's castle, and there are still a small number of militias fighting with the guards at the north gate, but it seems that they won't be able to hold on for long. Lightning had already investigated the situation in the city and reported in detail to the prince. The number of people besieging the castle is about 200, and the first layer has been lost. The enemy does have a weapon similar to a gun, but it is completely different from the one we use. Is Perot all right? Roland was most concerned about the safety of his agent. He's fine, just a little frightened, but what? His family suffered a disaster, Lightning said, curling her lips. Probably Sir Perot received the news in advance and summoned his father to the castle, but the rest of his relatives in the territory, including the Countess, were killed by the nobles as hostages to force him to surrender. The little girl paused. I found a chance to fly into the castle to meet him, and told him that you would arrive soon. He only asked me one thing. Roland nodded. Go ahead. An eye for an eye. There was an unwritten rule among the nobles that it was rare to kill someone with a title. As a relative of the Earl of Honeysuckle, most of them had the title of Sir. But now, the four great families actually dared to completely fall out with each other. Apart from their hatred towards the honeysuckle flower for relying on Roland to earn a lot of benefits, the other reason was probably the forces behind them. By now, Roland could basically confirm that it was the new king, Timothy Wimbledon, who was supporting the church to kill the nobles, and helping the king to execute the rebels were two completely different things. He looked in the direction of the stronghold and said coldly, Pass down my order. All troops are to enter the city and occupy the docks. 8 heard footsteps below the city wall. Numbly, he raised his flintlock and aimed at the dark hole under his feet. This was the only way to climb up the wall from the inside. After the enemy seized the gate, they launched several waves of attacks, but in the end, they failed to take down the northern part of the wall. The battle had been going on since noon yesterday. He had never thought that he would be able to last so long in the biting cold wind. However, when he saw his teammates fall into a pool of blood one by one, he could no longer think about anything else. They're here again? A spear appeared beside him. 8 glanced to his side and found that it was his team leader, Copper Mountain. I heard something, he answered weakly, but it's so dark now, I can't see how many people there are. They also don't know how many of us are left, Copper Mountain comforted him. Then, how many are left? Copper Mountain hesitated. 5. Crow just breathed his last. Most of us won't live through tonight, 8 said bitterly. From the initial fear and panic to the current numbness, he finally understood what his instructor meant when he said, Only real battles can make you mature quickly. However, this did not change the predicament they were in. Of the 3 squads that had gathered together, only 5 people were left. Even if the enemy did not attack the top of the wall, they would still freeze to death due to the lack of food and winter supplies. What's the use of surrendering now? Surrender? Copper Mountain snorted. Didn't you hear what they were shouting? Wipe out the rebels. Even if we surrender, we'll still die. We might as well kill some of them here. 8 knew his captain was right. Many of the soldiers of the Second Army who came to the rescue yesterday had been captured and beheaded. They were not nobles, so they had no value in ransom. But he was not willing to die here. The instructor had described all kinds of beautiful things about Border Town to him, and had also promised that as long as the months of the demons were over, the soldiers of the Second Army who performed well would be promoted to the First Army, and would also receive a new house for free. There was plenty of food, well water that would flow automatically when the valve was opened, and the room was heated without needing a fire. He wanted to survive and go to Border Town to see the magical things his instructor had told him. "They're coming!" Copper Mountain suddenly shouted and pulled the trigger. With the flash of the muzzle, 8 saw the silhouettes of the enemies in the dark. 6 or 7 people were slowly climbing up with shields in their hands. He could even see their terrified faces. Although the captain's shot did not hit the target, it had pointed him in the right direction. He aimed at the figure that disappeared in a flash and fired. The bullets hit the wooden shields with a dull thud. One of the men screamed in pain, followed by the sound of a heavy object rolling down the stairs. Seeing that they had been exposed, the rest of the soldiers desperately ran to the exit. Copper Mountain was still reloading the gun, but his frozen hands affected his speed. 8 shrank back and felt a chill in his heart when he reached for the gunpowder bag at his waist. It was empty. He had used up all the gunpowder. According to his usual training, he should have put on the bayonet at this time. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the bayonet. It took him a while to fix the sleeve on the gun, but before he could straighten the spear, the first enemy had already rushed out of the cave. Copper Mountain decisively attacked and knocked the first enemy to the ground. However, the second enemy who followed closely behind stabbed the captain's long sword into his chest. 8's mind went blank. He subconsciously thrust his spear out according to his training, but it hit the enemy's shield instead. The enemy kicked him to the ground, and the gun fell out of his hand. "Am I going to die here?" He looked up in despair, only to find that there was a shadow in the sky. It should have been difficult to distinguish such a dark thing on a snowy night, but the shadow was too close to him. It was like a falling curtain of the night, falling rapidly toward him. As the shadow became clearer, 8's eyes widened. It was a giant monster. He swore that he would only see such a horrible monster in his nightmares. It had a bloody mouth, a head bigger than a calf, and its wings could almost cover the entire top of the wall. The giant monster landed in front of 8, and crushed the enemy who had just crawled out of the hole into a meat patty. Roareo. Chapter 449. 8 was so scared that he could not move. He could only watch as the monster turned its head to look at him. He could even see the mucus dripping from its grayish-brown fangs. "Don't worry. I won't eat you. Ow." The monster suddenly spoke in a muffled human voice, which almost made 8 scream. "Oh my God, this thing can talk." What surprised him even more was that a woman jumped down from the monster's back and walked to Bronze Mountain. She turned him over and felt him for a while. "This guy is still alive. Maggie, take him to Nana." Ow. The monster seemed to understand her words. It raised its 2 front claws and grabbed the captain. It flapped its wings again and flew away. The strong airflow made 8 unable to open his eyes. When the wind and snow stopped, he squinted his eyes and looked up. There was no one on top of the city wall, as if everything that had happened was just a dream. No, it's not a dream. The woman is still here. The top of the city wall was pitch black. He could only see her figure roughly. There was no light around, but her pupils were emitting a strange golden light, like stars in the night sky. Who are you?" "Reinforcements." The woman's answer stunned him. What? 8 felt that even a dream would be more real than this. "Are you here to help me? This is His Highness Roland's order." She squatted down and found a long sword from the flattened corpse. She waved it casually, ignoring the blood and flesh on it. 8 felt something churning in his stomach. He retched twice, but nothing came out except acid. At this moment, shouts came from below the city tower again. It was obvious that the commotion caused by the giant beast and the terrifying roar had shocked the enemy. However, it was only a shock. They couldn't see the shocking scene happening on top of the city wall. When the commotion subsided, they began to move again. "The Highness you mentioned. Is it the Prince of Border Town?" he asked, wiping the corner of his mouth and gasping. Besides him, Is there anyone else named Roland? The black-haired woman started to look for weapons on another body. Ain't turned his head away, and did not want to see what she was doing. But Border Town is at least 3 days away from here. How could His Highness know about the noble rebellion so quickly? Ain't swallowed his saliva. And that monster was. That's not a monster, but a witch who saved you. Her tone turned cold. I don't have time to answer your questions. Just stay here quietly. Without the obstruction of the muskets, the enemy successfully climbed up the city wall. The flickering light of the torches lit up again, but when they found that there was only a woman standing in front of them, they were all stunned. But very quickly, this stalemate was broken by a low, malicious laughter. Aite naturally understood the meaning behind the laughter. All of you pay attention. Don't get tricked by these bastards. Don't worry, boss. We'll keep an eye on him for you, but later, when I'm done, it'll be yours. Hee, no problem. Quick, come back to me. Ain't struggled to get up from the ground, but what happened next left him dumbfounded. A silver light flashed and the laughter stopped abruptly. The leading enemy was cut in half by the longsword. Even his shield and leather armor could not block the blade. He did not even see how the woman did it. When the two halves of the body fell down with blood spurting, everyone's smile froze on their faces. However, this was just the beginning. The black-haired woman took a step forward and swung her sword horizontally. He could not see her movements clearly, but Ain't heard a series of sounds of flesh scraping and bones breaking. Before the remaining 3 could react, their abdomens were cut open. Their intestines came out and mixed with blood, spilling all over the ground. Ain't opened his mouth but did not know what to say. The woman looked back at him and said, "Go and gather the rest of your companions on top of the wall. Someone will come to pick you up later." Then she jumped down the city wall. This section of the city wall was at least 30 feet high. Enduring the pain all over his body, he scrambled to the edge of the city wall and looked down. He saw that the crowd below had turned into a pot of boiling water. The woman was rampaging, sweeping everything in her way. She swung her weapon up and down like harvesting wheat, cutting down anyone who dared to stand in front of her. In less than a quarter of an hour, the enemy collapsed. They had never seen such a terrible opponent. She was faster than a snow wolf and stronger than a grizzly bear. No one could survive a round of her sword. They could not avoid or block her attacks. The subordinates of the nobles all fled. The siege had been broken by one person. She chased after the fleeing crowd, leaving a path of blood behind. Ain't sat on the ground, feeling cold sweat soaking his back. Was this the power of a witch? But no matter what, he survived. Dozens of bonfires lit up the surroundings of the stronghold castle. The people of the 4 families had surrounded the place tightly. After a day and a night of fighting, the second floor of the castle had also been conquered. The rebels of the Honeysuckle family had now retreated to the top floor, suffering from hunger and fear. Looking at the towering castle in front of him, Jacques Med felt a trace of excitement in his heart. After his father's death, he had come all the way back from King's City to inherit the Earl's title, and now he had a chance to go further. His Majesty Timothy's secret letter mentioned that if he could control Longsong's stronghold for King's City, the army of King's City would come here when the snow melted to suppress the rebel king, Roland Wimbledon. As long as he could completely eradicate the rebel king's forces, it was possible to let him manage the western region. Plus, he would get a share of the territory of the Earl of Honeysuckle. By then, he would become a duke. Duke Med, what a wonderful title. And this castle would also be his permanent residence in the future. "My lord, the 6th attack team has retreated." A knight came over and reported. "They said the enemy's gunfire has become much less frequent. Should we send the armored team?" Jacques Med nodded and said, "Go ahead and arrange it." The so-called armored team was a team specially set up to deal with firearms, usually consisting of 3 or 4 people. The 2 of them held a wooden shield that was made of several layers of iron sheets, and was able to cover their whole body. In the middle of the shield, there was a lookout slot and a shooting hole for the gunners on their side to return fire. In order to make a few more of these shields, he reluctantly tore apart more than 10 pieces of knight armor. Of course, the thick iron shields also had a weakness that they were not easy to move. When going up and down the stairs, they could easily become the enemy's target. Fortunately, the honeysuckle family won't be able to hold on for much longer. Jacques sneered in his heart. Although the other party's reaction was unexpectedly fast, and they had already sent some of the patrolling soldiers and knights into the castle before the allied forces of the four families charged into the fortress, there were still less than 100 of them. It would take several days for the news to reach the ears of Prince Roland. Chapter 450. My lord, there seems to be something wrong in the west of the city. The guard in charge of blocking the street suddenly walked quickly to Earl Med's side. I heard a strange sound coming from there, so I sent 2 teams to investigate, but none of them came back. What? Jacques frowned. You didn't hear it wrong, did you? No, I heard it very clearly. It was like the sound of a person constantly inhaling and exhaling, wheezing and wheezing. The guard even simulated it a few times. Not a tramp snoring? People sleeping outside in this weather would have frozen to death, my lord, the guard insisted. And if a person could make such a loud snoring sound, he must be at least a giant as tall as the city wall. The count stared at him for a long time before he turned around and shouted, Sir Dakin. My lord, you called? A noble with the Maple family emblem on his chest came up to him. Bring your guards and follow my men to check the pier in the city. Jacques patted him on the shoulder. Report to me immediately if you find anything. Can you find someone else? The young noble hesitated. Father told me to go into the castle with you. How long will it take to check the pier? It's a long time, the count said with a smile. Even if the honeysuckle family rebels surrender, I'll wait for you here. Well. Okay. Watching the 2 leave, Jacques' face turned cold. What the hell? Do they think they can get the same credit just because they sent their son to the castle with me? His Majesty's secret letter only mentioned me. What a good plan. Not long after, he vaguely heard gunshots coming from the west. What's going on? Jacques immediately became alert. The eldest son of the Maple family did not get any guns at all. Just when he was about to send his knight to check the situation, the guard who had reported earlier stumbled into the camp. My lord. Bad news. What's bad news? The rebel king. The rebel king is here, the guard said with his eyes wide open. There are thousands of them, and they're coming to the castle. You mean Roland Wimbledon's team? Jacques raised his hand and slapped the guard. There are thousands of them? Do you believe that I won't hang you on top of the city gate right now for spouting nonsense in the camp? Sir, they were indeed holding the flag of the Grey Castle royal family. The guard did not dare to dodge, so he knelt on one knee and said, I wanted Sir Daukin's squire to capture 2 people for questioning, but as soon as they rushed over, they. So what? The count asked, gritting his teeth. He was shot down by a concentrated volley of gunfire. The guard's expression was as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. At that time, there seemed to be countless sparks in the darkness, and the crackling sound almost never stopped. More than 20 of them had only rushed out less than 100 steps, and they all fell to the ground. Even the horses couldn't stand. He swallowed his saliva and said, Sir, I've never seen such a concentrated shooting. If there weren't more than 1,000 people, how could they kill Sir's guards in an instant? Where's the eldest son of the Maple family? He's already escaped. The count sat on the chair with his legs weak. How could this be possible? His mind was in a mess. Counting the time it took for the news to come and go, the 4 families started to act yesterday at noon, and Prince Roland could arrive at Longsong's stronghold tonight. Did it mean that he could travel back and forth between the 2 places in one day? Even a sailing ship with the wind all the way could not achieve this speed. And 1,000 people was even more like a fantasy. To transport so many people in one breath, at least a large fleet was needed, but the information from Border Town showed that they did not even have a ship before winter. How could things become like this? No, the more it was like this, the calmer he had to be. Jacques wiped the sweat off his forehead. The number of people should have been bullshit by the guards. He was completely scared out of his wits by the gunfire. Without the light of a torch, who knew how many people were standing in the dark dock area? Moreover, the range of the guns was only about 40 steps or so. Although the power was amazing, the loading speed and hit rate were extremely low. Even if all of them were equipped with these weapons, the street leading to the castle area could at most accommodate more than 20 people side by side. As long as the Wild Rose family and the Wolf family were informed, they could gather the night together and wait for the enemy to shoot at once. Then the other mercenaries and guards would swarm in, and maybe they could defeat the enemy. After all, fighting in the streets was not like fighting in the wild. The loading time of the guns was too fatal. Damn it. Jacques slammed the armrest of the chair and ordered the captain of the guard. Go and invite the Count of the Wild Rose family and the Viscount of the Wolf family here. In addition, I want all the people with guns to block the entrance of the castle area. Go. Anyway, the training of guns was much faster than the training of crossbows. First, let this group of people delay the enemy's advance. It would not hurt if some of them died. If necessary, the knight could directly step over them. However, the news brought by the captain of the guard stunned the count. The two of them have left the camp with their men. In order to prevent Perrault from escaping, the four families each occupied one side of the castle area. He did not expect that they would receive the news faster than him. At this time, there was a lot of gunfire outside the castle area. Just as the guard had reported, it was like a dense drum beat, which could be heard clearly even in the windy and snowy night. These bastards! Jacques felt a chill in his heart. He looked at the castle for the last time, and had to order a retreat. Of course, it was only himself and his guards. As for the people still in the castle, he had no time to care about them. After rushing out of the castle area, the count found that the situation was not good. The enemy was everywhere outside, and any knight who tried to cross the blockade would be mercilessly shot down. The weapons in their hands seemed as if they didn't need to be reloaded, and they could shoot several times in one breath, which was completely different from the flintlock that Timothy had sent. The scene was chaotic. Except for Sir Dawkin, who had escaped first, the other three families were trapped here. Sir, what should we do? Call the armored team, he shouted. We'll follow the iron shields and rush in the same direction. When the three armored teams slowly moved forward with their shields, the other knight also noticed the movement here, and almost simultaneously followed. If they could not break through the enemy's line of defense this time, they were afraid that they would never have a chance to escape. However, Jacques' plan failed. When they were still 100 steps away from the enemy's weapons sprayed dazzling flames. The shields that should be able to block lead bullets were shot full of holes by the oncoming bullets. The shield bearers in the front row were instantly killed, and the splashing metal fragments pierced through their bodies. A thick mist of blood rose behind the iron shields. Before the count could shout the order to charge, he was directly knocked to the ground by a round of gunfire. To be continued. Chapter 451. Genius in a Second to Remember Love? Talked.net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Roland walked into the messy castle. Perrault and Earl Hull were already kneeling on one knee in the hall, welcoming his arrival. The corpses on the ground had all been moved away, but the smell of blood still lingered. Broken furnishings and broken weapons could be seen everywhere. He could almost imagine the scene of repeated battles between the two sides during the battle for the castle. Get up. Roland walked in front of him, bent down and held his arm. Yes. Perrault's voice was a little choked. Your Highness, you're finally here. You did a good job, he said in a low voice. The four families will pay the price for this, and the murderers will be brought to justice. I couldn't defend Longsong's stronghold for you. You did your best. It's not your fault, Roland sighed. Perrault was not a good manager, which could be seen from the previous capture of the city by the light cavalry and the current noble rebellion. He was good at managing the territory, was very proficient in trade, and was also good at seizing opportunities. But he was not a political strategist, and was not good at fighting and conspiring. If the Second Army had not been stationed in the castle according to emergency measures, he would not have been able to hold on for 2 days. But this did not mean that Perrault Hull was not a good manager. If he was not good at fighting, he should have given him a territory that did not need to fight. Compared to a talent who could fight, Roland preferred an operator who had the mind of a businessman. Love go small say netku. I believe there must be a reason for this riot. He looked around at all the people present. This is a complete conspiracy. The enemy is trying to subvert the order of the Western region, so as to obtain benefits that do not belong to them. The scene quieted down. Whether it was the soldiers of the First Army who were on guard with guns, or the wounded knight behind Perrault, they all looked at His Highness with burning eyes. For this, they did not hesitate to commit felonies, murder the nobles, and slaughter the people. After today's battle, it was unknown how many people would lose their families and how many houses would be ransacked. But in the end, their plot did not succeed. It was your unyielding resistance that prevented the fortress from falling into an even greater tragedy. Your performance was heroic, and your willpower is commendable. The knight unknowingly puffed out his chest a little higher. However, the battle is not over yet. These traitors are fleeing in panic. Next, it's time for us to take revenge. I swear, no matter where the enemy hides, they will not be able to escape the judgment that will come, whether it is in the territory of the four great families, or in the capital. Roland paused, then said firmly, and the culprit who started the rebellion will definitely be punished. Your blood will not flow in vain. Long live His Highness. Perrault and Earl Hull knelt down again. Long live His Highness. Long live His Highness. Then the surviving knight and the soldiers of the Second Army shouted. Soon, everyone was kneeling on one knee. Their upper bodies were straight, and their right hands were placed on their chests as they shouted a slogan in unison. Long live Prince Roland. After comforting the people present, Roland summoned Perrault, Van Brian, and Iron Axe to the study on the third floor of the castle. This was the only place that had not been invaded, and all the furnishings were basically intact. He knew that he would probably have to spend the next few days here. First, he had to learn about the situation in the city. He looked at Iron Axe, who immediately reported, "The witches have recaptured the north and east gates that the four great families occupied. Now the First Army, under the guidance of Miss Sylvie, is cleaning up the rebels in the city. They should be able to restore order in the city by tomorrow morning." What about the casualties? So far, a total of 6 people have been injured, all from the Rifle Battalion, but they have been treated by Miss Nana. What about the Second Army? Have you calculated? Not yet, but according to the current information, the casualties are relatively heavy. Brian hesitated. The 2 squads that went to support the city wall were defeated, and haven't been regrouped yet. Of the 50 people guarding the castle, 11 were killed, and almost none of the soldiers patrolling on the city wall survived. Roland nodded. The fact that these 100 people could hold on for 2 days was due to the low intensity of the war in this era, especially when the enemy lacked effective siege weapons. The defending side often had a greater advantage. If the enemy had not used firearms, it would have been very difficult to break into the Lord's castle by relying on the flesh and blood of the mercenaries and personal guards. At the beginning of the design, this building had fully taken into account the fact that it could prevent enemy attacks. Thinking of this, he ordered Iron Axe, "Bring me some firearms used by the rebels and let me have a look." Roland was very concerned about the new hot weapons in this era. Although he had known that this day would come sooner or later since the birth of the snow powder, Timothy's speed of research and development really surprised him. Iron Axe quickly carried out the order. Half an hour later, several long-barreled weapons of different lengths and shapes were carried into the study by the soldiers. After seeing the real thing, Roland quickly understood why the other party was able to create this batch of weapons in such a short time. In a sense, these long-barreled weapons could not be called flintlocks. They had no trigger or firing mechanism. They were just metal pipes with holes at both ends. One end was deeper and was used to load gunpowder and bullets, with a needle-like hole at the end for ignition. The other end was shallower and was inserted into a bamboo pole or wooden stick to act as a handle. In terms of structure, it was very similar to the prototype of the flintlock, the flintlock. The loading process of this primitive firearm was the same as that of a flintlock, but it was more troublesome to fire. It required the gunman to clamp the wooden pole under his armpit and hold an open flame in his other hand to ignite the gunpowder. Due to the limited posture, it was impossible to aim accurately and could only roughly point forward. But it was still an out-and-out hot weapon. Apart from all kinds of inconveniences, its firing principle was exactly the same as that of a flintlock, and the barrel and bullets were no different from those of a later generation. Therefore, it was far more powerful than a crossbow. As long as it hit, even a knight's armor would not be able to withstand it. Furthermore, it was obvious that Timothy had spent a lot of effort to modify these flintlock spears. Some of them were made of rolled iron, with clear traces of hammering left on the body, while others were probably made of wrought copper, with a relatively smooth surface. Considering that these were only experimental products for the four families, Timothy's own firearms should be better. But no matter how good a flintlock gun was, it was still a flintlock gun. When the spring offensive was launched, the king would have no chance of winning against the Western Region army equipped with revolving rifles, bolt rifles, and heavy machine guns. Roland turned his eyes back to the four people. From tomorrow on, the First Army will recover the suburbs of Longsong's stronghold one by one. Any nobles who resist can be shot on the spot. I hope that in a week, the whole Western region will be unified. Chapter 452. Ren Med had been trapped in the basement of the House of Elks for half a month. He thought he could stop Jacques, but he did not expect that Jacques would act first. This is today's lunch. Please enjoy. The long-faced butler, Sean, handed a plate of sticky food to the side of the cage. It looked like a mixture of oatmeal and vegetable leaves, and the portion was only the size of a palm. "Let me out, you idiot." Ren threw the plate to the ground, grabbed the bars and shouted, "Jacques is also an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's not too late to let me out." The butler shook his head regretfully and took out a handkerchief to wipe his dirty shoes. "If I were you, I wouldn't waste the food that hasn't reached my mouth. His Excellency the Count has ordered that in order to save your energy, I'll only send food once a day this Monday." "Damn it, didn't you hear what I said?" Ren cursed. "This is not a matter of one meal. If we don't stop Jacques, he'll destroy the House of Elks. For my father's sake, quickly open this cage." Perhaps the second half of the sentence worked, as the butler who was about to leave stopped in his tracks. "Your father? I think if he were still alive, I'm afraid he would expel you immediately." He turned his head and looked at Ren expressionlessly. "Young master, you seem to have forgotten that it was Roland Wimbledon, the fourth prince, who killed the Count of Elks. The Honeysuckle family not only defected to the prince, but also assisted him in suppressing the other four families. Right now, your brother is correcting this mistake, but you're scared out of your wits. How can you be regarded as a knight? It's not up to you to judge whether I'm a qualified knight or not," Ren said angrily. "In the past 3 years, when I was fighting against the demonic beasts in the Hermes defense line, Jacques was enjoying himself in the king's city. Do you think he attacked the Honeysuckle family out of courage? Don't make me laugh to death. He's just blinded by benefits." Sean sighed and said, "Even though you're Lord Jacques' brother, you should still respect him. After all, he's an earl and the head of the Elk family." With that, the butler ignored Ren and quickly left the basement along the stairs. When the door closed, the underground returned to silence. "Damn it!" The second son of the Elk slammed his fist on the floor. Since the beginning of winter, Jacques had been visiting the other families more and more frequently. At first, he did not pay much attention to it. After all, he had no interest in running his family. Furthermore, when he was captured by the prince for the first time, Jacques refused to pay the ransom, and it was Perrault who helped him get out of prison. Thus, the relationship between Jacques and the prince dropped to the freezing point. Even so, Ren didn't intend to compete with him for the position of the head of the family. When he heard that Border Town was planning to build a city, he even considered going to Border Town and pledging his loyalty to the fourth prince, officially becoming a guardian knight. But later, the situation changed. During a private banquet held by the Elk Mansion, he heard the news that the four families were preparing to unite against Longsong's stronghold. That night, Ren rushed into Jacques' study and questioned him about the matter, but was kicked out by Jacques with great displeasure. After thinking for a whole night, he planned to tell the news to Perrault first, and then bring the patrol team to stop Jacques. Unexpectedly, Jacques had tampered with the breakfast, and when he woke up, he found himself in a cage. After that, no matter how much Ren roared and warned him, he could not see Jacques again. Every day, he could only tell the time by looking at the skylight in the corner of the basement, and the only person he could contact was Jacques' personal butler. Growl. His stomach growled. And only then did he realize that he was a little hungry. Looking at the food scattered on the ground, Ren turned his head and lay down on the wheat straw pile behind him. I'd better sleep, he thought. If I sleep, I won't feel hungry. Just as he closed his eyes, he heard footsteps in the basement again. Could it be Jacques? He jumped down from the straw pile and leaned against the railing. With the faint light coming in from the skylight, he saw a small and slender figure. Obviously, it was not the arrogant Count. Brother, are you okay? When the person came to the cage, he found that it was Aurelia, the third daughter of the elk family. Why are you in here? My brother is not here, and the servants can't control me. Aurelia looked at the oatmeal on the ground and said in disbelief, They gave you this? That's too much. Wait for me. I'll ask the kitchen to make something for you. Jacques is not in the mansion? Hearing the first half of his sister's words, Ren's heart suddenly sank, and he did not even have time to fill his stomach. Where did he go? I don't know. He left 2 days ago. Aurelia shook her head. He took most of the guards with him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance to enter the basement. It's over. Ren's heart sank. He had not returned for 2 days, and today was the 3rd day. Even if he could get out now, it would probably be too late. Brother, I heard that my brother wants to harm the Honeysuckle family. Is it true? Aurelia looked worried. Will Lord Perrault be okay? That's right. My sister has always liked Perrault Hull, and I've tried to matchmake them, but it seems that my friend has someone else in mind. But it was useless to think about it now. Ren leaned against the railing and sat down weakly. According to Jacques' style, he would definitely not let the Hull family go. Then, the whole western region would have to face the wrath of His Highness Thunder. Jacques has been in King City for too long, and he has no idea what he's going to face. Ren closed his eyes, and his mind involuntarily recalled the day of the attack on Border Town. Flames were blooming in front of him, and thunder was incessant. The knight who rushed in front seemed to have hit an invisible wall. His armor was vulnerable in front of the transparent arrows, and his years of training and the courage to fight for honor were all useless in front of the enemy's weapons. From that moment on, he could no longer think of going against His Highness. No one could defeat His Highness's troops, at least not mortals. If Prince Roland knew what happened in Stronghold and came again, no matter how many benefits the Elk family gained, what use would it be? This time, he would not let the 4 big families go. Brother, what's wrong? Aurelia shook him, but he did not move at all. The Elk family was finished. Just then, through the thick ceiling, Ren heard a faint roar. And then the ground slightly trembled, as if something had smashed into the mansion. Did I hear it wrong? Ren turned over, and saw that his sister had the same surprised expression. Then there was another dull thunder, but this time it was much clearer. Then there were continuous bangs, and the servants' panicked shouts came from above. Could it be Prince Roland's troops? Ren could not help but be stunned. How is this possible? What's happening outside? Aurelia stood up. I'll go out and have a look. No. Ren grabbed his sister's hand. Don't go anywhere. Just wait here. Ha. Listen to me. He swallowed and said dryly, there may be danger outside. The roar soon subsided. After about a quarter of an hour, a group of people broke into the basement. They wore brown uniforms and held strange long-handled weapons in their hands. Ren recognized at a glance that they were Prince Roland's troops. He was completely disheartened. He knew that Prince Roland would retaliate, but he did not expect it to come so soon. Could it be that this was a play written and performed by Prince Roland himself? Who are you? How dare you break into the Earl's mansion? Aurelia stood up and shouted. A tall, strong man walked out of the team. His facial features were sharp, and there was a murderous air between his eyebrows. He looked like a foreigner. You're the second son of the Elk family, Sir Renmed? The man asked. You know. Why don't you step back? What do you want? Aurelia's voice was trembling, but she still stood in front of the iron bars. I'm Ren. Don't hurt her. She's innocent. Ren thought that he was about to see an unbearable scene, but he did not expect that the man would completely ignore Aurelia, and what he said next was completely unexpected. Chapter 453. When Ren walked out of the Count's mansion, he involuntarily squinted his eyes and took a deep breath. After half a month, he finally felt the taste of daylight and snow again. Soldiers in uniforms could be seen everywhere outside. They did not rush into the mansion to plunder, but stood at every intersection in an orderly manner. Occasionally, he could see blood stains in the snow, but not a corpse. There were no messy clothes or cloth on the ground, which meant that they did not loot the dead when they cleaned up the battlefield. Ren confirmed his thoughts again. This team was different from any troop he had ever seen. Is Perot all right? He looked at Iron Axe beside him. How is Longsong's stronghold? Everything is fine. This strong alien man was a man of few words, and his answers were also very simple. But as long as he asked, he would always get an answer. Everything was fine, which meant that Jacques Med's plan did not succeed. He was a little relieved. If Stronghold had not been destroyed and the Honeysuckle family had not been harmed, Perot would have said a few good words for him. As for Jacques' fate, he did not even bother to think about it. A fool who had almost dragged the elk into the abyss had nothing to do with him. Brother, what did Jacques do? Aurelia leaned over and asked in a low voice. He hesitated for a moment and finally shook his head. I don't know. Aurelia immediately showed a, "You're lying to me" look. Ren smiled bitterly. He really did not know how to answer this question. If Jacques had tried to rebel, he had only heard about it at the stage of planning. As for what happened in the end, he had no idea at all. After a moment of silence, he said, "Are you really going to follow us to the castle?" Of course. I'm also very curious about what happened that made these people dare to break into the Count's mansion in broad daylight. At this point, she also stared at Iron Axe. Lord Perot will not just sit by and do nothing. Ren knew that his sister was actually worried about him. So he finally nodded and said, "Well, if you ask him, he should tell you the details." The group rode along the snow-covered road for about an hour, and arrived at the fortress at noon. Under the guidance of Iron Axe, Ren and his sister ascended to the 3rd floor. The security here was even tighter, and there was a guard every few steps. After walking into a room that looked like a study, he finally saw Perot Hull, his childhood friend. But she just stood there respectfully. There was also a man in gray sitting in front of the desk. He was playing with a quill in his hand and looking at Aurelia and himself with great interest. Almost instantly, Ren recalled the identity of this person. He immediately knelt down on one knee. "Your Highness, Ren Vader pays his respects to you." This is... Aurelia was a little surprised, but under Ren's gentle gesture, she still bent her knees and bowed. "We met in Longsong's stronghold," the prince said with a smile, "in the basement of the castle. I just heard from Iron Axe that you've been locked up again this time?" Ren was startled and didn't know how to answer for a moment. Fortunately, His Highness didn't really want to hear the answer. "Get up." Before I ordered the attack on the Elk family's territory, Perot repeatedly assured me that you would never participate in Jacques Med's rebellion. It seems that he was right. But, how did you get locked up? Ren looked at Perot gratefully, and then told him everything about his family. "I see." The prince nodded. "It's a pity. If you could stop the Earl of the Elk family, Longsong's stronghold wouldn't have to suffer this disaster." The prince's words shocked Ren. Aurelia couldn't help but ask, "Big brother, what's wrong?" Jacques Med colluded with the Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose families and attacked Longsong's stronghold the day before yesterday. The prince said coldly, "This attack caused many innocent casualties and 2 blocks were burned down. In order to force the Honeysuckle family to surrender, they didn't hesitate to attack Perot's family." When Ren heard the last sentence, he almost doubted that he had heard it wrong. Even when fighting against hostile nobles, it was an extremely shameful act to threaten the other side with family members. How could Jacques do such a thing? "This rebellion involves a lot of people, but I guarantee that no one involved in the attack can escape the punishment of the law. The rebels will be severely punished." The prince knocked on the table and said, "I came to Longsong's stronghold this time to clean up the entire western region. I won't let go of even a single rat." Ren felt a thin layer of sweat appear on his back. "Your Highness, don't worry. I won't vent my anger on those who are innocent. Roland waved his hand and interrupted. You don't have to worry about the Elk family being destroyed. In fact, I was just about to ask you a question. Jacques Med has died in the rebellion. Are you willing to inherit the Earl's position and serve me like Hull? There was almost no other answer to this question. Ren Med knelt down without hesitation and swore allegiance with the standard knight ceremony. When he stated the oath, he was unexpectedly calm. In fact, he never hated the prince who took his father's life. On the battlefield, accidents could happen to anyone, not to mention that it was the Duke Ryan and the other 5 families who started the war, not the prince. After the war, he didn't treat the defeated nobles harshly. He even exchanged captives with ransom in the way the nobles tacitly agreed. If his father hadn't died on the spot, he would probably have returned to his territory safely like the Earl of Honeysuckle. Ren had received the knight's training, and had also implemented the knight's philosophy in his heart. Any honorable battle was praiseworthy. On the contrary, Jacques' way of doing things was completely without honor. It was meaningless except for deepening the hatred between them. And for the sake of Aurelia and the other innocent members of his family, he had to agree. Without the protection of the Elk family, they would probably never be able to live a stable life again. After the oath, the prince nodded with a smile. You and your sister can live in the castle for the next few days. Perrault will arrange rooms for you. There are still other families active in the suburbs. When the rebellion is completely quelled, you can return to your territory. Yes, Your Highness. After Ren left the study, Perrault followed him out. Looking at his friend who had lost a lot of weight, Roland had mixed feelings for a moment. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Perrault patted him on the shoulder. Don't take it to heart. For some reason, he felt that there was some distance between them. In Perrault's eyes, there was a look that he had never seen before. It was like steel that had been repeatedly hammered in a furnace, reflecting a vague firmness and steadiness. Chapter 454. The rebellious nobles were vulnerable in front of the First Army. They only exchanged fire a few times, but the outcome was always decided after a round of volleys. They did not even need to replace the cartridge before they were routed and fled, leaving dozens of corpses behind. Most of the time, the First Army only pursued and hunted them down. Iron Axe cleared a piece of territory every day and captured the Elk, Wolf and Wild Rose families' encampments one after another. However, when the troops advanced to the Maple Leaf territory, their attack momentum slowed down. They had run into unexpected trouble. Damn it, this is no different from a stronghold. Brian looked at the towering Earl's mansion in front of him and spat angrily. It even has a moat. Was anyone injured in the last round of attack? Iron Axe asked coldly. 2 unlucky guys were injured. One was shot in the arm, and the other was shot in the back while retreating. Fortunately, it's not a big problem, Brian said with a frown. The soldiers were at a disadvantage shooting at the roof from below. Even if they only had arrows and short bows, we would still be at a disadvantage. Iron Axe knew that Brian was right. No one had expected that the Earl of Maple Leaf would build his residence in the form of a tower, which was built on a mountain and backed by a rocky cliff. The stream flowing down from the impassable mountain range was led into a ditch more than 5 meters wide, forming a small moat around the mansion. Because it was running water, it was not completely frozen, even though it was covered with floating ice and snow. There was only one entrance to the whole tower. If they wanted to attack the gate, they had to cross the arch bridge, which was also an important part of the enemy's defense. There was no cover around the Earl's mansion, only flat snowy ground. The First Army could shoot from a high vantage point to make up for the short range of their bows. After 2 rounds of probing attacks, the First Army only managed to kill 3 or 4 of their opponents, while several of their own were wounded. If only the artillery battalion was here, Brian said bitterly. I don't believe that he won't surrender after a few shots at the gate. Unfortunately, they can't come here. This place is too far from the stronghold, and the snow is too deep. Iron Axe looked up at the sky and said, Let's call it a day. Arrange for the soldiers to set up camp. The fief of the Maple Leaf family was located in the northwest of Longsong Stronghold, next to the impassable mountain range, which was also the edge of the western region. Just walking to this place took almost a day's worth of effort. In addition, there was no one to clear the snow on the road, so the 12-pound field artillery could not move an inch. According to the information they obtained, the Maple family had contributed very little to the rebellion. Even the Earl himself didn't show up, which meant that the enemy's strength was almost intact. If they were all holed up in this fortress-like tower without siege weapons, it would be very difficult to deal with them. After nightfall, a bonfire was lit in the tents of the camp. What should we do tomorrow? Brian added a piece of wood to the fire pit. Order the soldiers to rush forward while facing the arrows? As long as we can blow up that damn iron gate, their time of death will come. But the First Army would also suffer a dozen casualties. Iron Axe shook his head and did not answer. If he had been in Iron Sand City before, not to mention 10 guards, even if he had to lead 100 guards, as long as he could complete the task assigned by the chief, he would not hesitate to sacrifice all of them. But after coming to the western region, he saw how these soldiers had grown to where they were today. At the thought of His Highness Roland's painstaking efforts on them, he felt a little reluctant. After a long silence, he exhaled a white breath and said, "Let's ask the witches." Brian was startled. Ask them. Iron Axe did not want to do so. He remembered His Highness had once said that a qualified army should have the ability to complete a task independently at any time. But now was not the time to compete. In order to achieve the goal of unifying the western region within a week and to reduce casualties as much as possible, he would not bite the bullet with an inexplicable pride. Because His Highness had also said that a good general was responsible for the lives of his soldiers. Send out a messenger and tell them that we're in trouble and need Miss Maggie's help, he ordered. The next morning, Maggie and Lightning arrived at the camp. What happened? Cuckoo. Iron Axe coughed twice and briefly explained the current thorny problem. The enemy is mainly concentrated at the top of the tower, so the damage to them is limited. In addition, there is an iron gate at the entrance, so it's difficult for the First Army to get close to it. We can only ask you to open the exit. Leave it to us, the little girl said, patting her chest. Both of them were familiar with throwing, as they had trained with the First Army in Border Town. Iron Axe nodded, and immediately began to arrange the soldiers to prepare for the final attack. Regardless of whether the bag could achieve the desired effect or not, at least it could deter the enemy. Taking advantage of this time, they should have enough time to destroy the Iron Gate. You want to go into battle yourself? Brian looked at Iron Axe in surprise and stuffed the loaded cartridge into his belt. It's not so much for me to charge, it's better to charge with me. Iron Axe smiled. This is what His Highness often says. When the two of them led the soldiers into the charging position, the figure of Maggie appeared on the horizon. She turned into a giant beast and swooped down to the tower along the rocky cliff, holding a bag in her sharp claws. Everyone saw this amazing scene. The First Army suddenly burst into loud cheers, while the top of the tower fell into chaos. The mercenaries and guards of the Maple Leaf family all turned their bows and shot at the giant beast, but it was a pity that the effect was negligible. Maggie had finished accumulating speed. She spread her huge wings and flapped them hard, abruptly pulled her body up, and at the same time, released her claws. The bag was like a cannonball, whistling straight to the top of the tower. Iron Axe felt the surroundings suddenly fall silent, and then he saw a dazzling fireball rising from the top of the tower. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The whole world seemed to be trembling. A huge column of smoke rose into the air with snow and fog, and a wave of heat rushed toward him. He could not help but take 2 steps back, his ears hurting from the shock. This is the power of God. Iron Axe could not help but recall the scene of the first time he witnessed His Highness's test explosion. This time, the explosion was far more powerful than before, and he could still feel the scorching heat contained in the fireball from a distance of nearly 100 meters. As for the enemies who were close to God's punishment on the top of the tower, it was easy to imagine what would happen to them. After silently praying to the 3 gods, Iron Axe raised his hand and shouted, "For His Highness, the First Army charge! For His Highness!" The soldiers shouted the slogan and swarmed toward the Earl's mansion. This time, no one dared to stop them. When Iron Axe returned to Longsong's stronghold, It was the evening of the 6th day. The entire western region was finally under the control of Roland. To be continued. Chapter 455. The study in Stronghold was much more spacious than the office in Border Town. Tall bookcases occupied the left and right walls, and the edges of the bookcases were inlaid with gilded metal, which was stuffed with all kinds of books. Along the way, Roland saw everything from epics to historical travelogues. To facilitate access to the books on the top floor, there was a wooden staircase beside the bookcase. Probably for safety reasons, the only window in the study was only half a person's height, and an iron railing was installed outside. When light shone into the room from the outside, a narrow beam of light could be seen clearly on the old plush carpet, giving the room a sense of isolation. If it were Anna, she would definitely like this place, Roland could not help thinking. But for him, the Border Town office with floor-to-ceiling windows and always bright rooms was more to his liking. Even though it was narrow, it was full of comfort. As for Nightingale, she often leaned against the fireplace and dozed off, which showed how much she disliked this place. At this time, there was a knock on the door. "Come in." Roland put The Secret History of the Western Region back into the bookcase. "Your Highness." Perot Hull walked into the study and put a stack of white paper on the table. "I've finished the statistics you asked me to do." Roland returned to the desk and carefully looked through the list of nobles. "Are these all the remaining nobles in the Western region?" "Yes," Perot explained briefly. "I divided them into 2 categories, guilty and innocent, and then sorted them by their family names. There are a total of 64 guilty nobles, and 137 people refused to participate in the rebellion or knew nothing about it. Most of the latter are free knight, sir, and minor nobles." Roland opened the first page of the list. The first one was the Maple Leaf Earl, Roman Candy. According to Iron Axe's report, this great noble had hidden himself in a wine barrel in the basement after his mansion had been breached. When the first army found him, he was so scared that even his pants were wet. He was also the rebel with the highest rank captured in this unification war. The next page was filled with the nobles of the Maple Leaf family, such as the 2 sons, other relatives, and the enfeoffed knight. Roland quickly flipped to the last page and folded the table with satisfaction. Good job. All in all, the 6 big families of the Western region had become history. Lion Ryan, Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose would never have a chance to rise again. Although the Honeysuckle family and the Elk family survived, they were no longer the feudal nobles in the past. All the power of the Western region would be in his hands. "Your Highness." Perot hesitated for a moment before saying, "The guilty and innocent verdicts on the list were provided to me by Mr. Iron Axe. Is it possible that there might be a miscarriage of justice?" Roland couldn't help but chuckle. He's very good at interrogating people, and he didn't torture them, so I think the final verdict can be trusted. In fact, this was just a cover. After all the captured nobles were locked up in the dungeon, Nightingale was responsible for identifying them. She only needed to ask a few simple questions to find out whether they had participated in the rebellion. This was also the reason why Roland dared to wipe out the nobles. With the help of Nightingale, he could really not let go of a bad guy, nor wrongly accuse a good guy. He didn't implicate the nobles, nor did he pretend to be open-minded and let the rioters go. Then, what are you going to do with these guilty nobles? What's wrong? Roland raised his head and glanced at Perot. "Are there any of your friends among them?" "No, Your Highness." The latter shook his head. "I just think that if you execute them all, it may be detrimental to your rule in the future. A week ago, you asked for an eye for an eye." The prince raised his eyebrows with interest. "Now you want to let them go?" "I do want them all to go to hell, but even if I strangle them one by one, it won't change anything. Instead, it may arouse the resentment of the other nobles towards the Honeysuckle family. And if the news of wantonly executing the nobles spreads, other cities may also set off a wave of opposition against your rule." Hearing this, Roland was quite surprised. This was indeed the way of thinking of a mature politician. Putting aside personal emotions, it was more about weighing interests. It seemed that this incident did not make him more disgusted with fighting, but made him mature. It's okay to tell you in advance. He stood up and walked to the small window. I'll announce the ins and outs of this matter to everyone, and then publicly sentence all the rioters in the square, including the nobles, guards, squires, and mercenaries. The main culprits, the direct initiators of the rebellion, and the villains with the people's blood on their hands, will be hanged, and the accomplices will be stripped of their titles and sent to the North Slope mine for labor reform. According to this method, only 5 or 6 nobles will be hanged. The Earl of the Elk family and the Viscount of the Wolf family have already died on the battlefield, and the rest of them will be equivalent to using their titles to save their lives. After the news spreads, I don't think anyone will think that this sentence is too harsh. After all, betraying the royal family is a felony. Perrault was a little relieved. Your Highness is merciful. When the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family left, Roland felt an unprecedented sense of fulfillment. This action had completely cleared the obstacles to the integration of the Western region for him. In the future, whether it was making laws or issuing policies, he would be unimpeded in this vast land. More importantly, he had gained the support of a large number of people and nobles. After the opposition was eliminated, the remaining people were naturally potential supporters. Especially after the nobles lost their feudal power and legal rights, if they wanted to live a comfortable life, they had to follow his policies and spare no effort to promote them. Because the nobles had far more resources than the commoners, as long as they used their brains a little, it was not difficult to gain benefits from it. Once they tasted the sweetness, they would never want to go back to the bitter days they used to have. After all, these small nobles had not enjoyed the benefits of the territory, and if they did not manage it well, they would have to pay for it. Soon they would realize that as long as they played chess according to the rules, they could easily live a life they had never imagined before. There was no doubt that the plan to build the city had taken a big step forward. Roland wiped the condensed water vapor off the window and looked through the blurry window at the city shrouded in white snow. Since he had to stay here for a while, and he would often come to Longsong Stronghold to deal with government affairs, he might as well transform this study into a prince's office according to his preferences. Chapter 456. 3 days later, Roland gave a speech in the theater of Longsong Stronghold. For this propaganda, he asked Perrault to inform the whole city of the details of the rebellion in advance, and specially asked Maggie to send a reply from Border Town. On that day, the crowd gathered in the theater was smaller than he had imagined. Although it was already spring, the snowflakes kept people from going out. Fortunately, the Second Army and their families were all present. It seemed that the generous compensation for the soldiers killed in the battle had worked. As for the other people, he could slowly win them over in the future. Roland believed that the best propaganda was from word of mouth. As long as the seeds were planted in the hearts of these people, it would sooner or later affect more people. This was also the reason why he insisted on building the People's Army. They were a sharp blade, an iron wall, and also a role model for propaganda. Good morning, my subjects. I'm Roland Wimbledon, Lord of the Western Region. I believe most of you have already heard of my name. Roland looked around at the people under the stage. First of all, I would like to express my condolences for the casualties caused by this turmoil. This was a conspiracy from King's City. In order to interfere with the order of the Western region, Timothy provoked wars again and again. Regrettably, the 4 families of the Western region not only did not stand on the side of the people, but also became the thugs of the other side, which eventually led to this tragedy. The prince did not talk too much about the content of the rebellion. Compared with his own serious speech, people preferred to inquire about these secrets in the tavern. Therefore, after a simple beginning, he shifted the topic to the compensation that the people were more concerned about. During the turmoil among the 112 soldiers of the Second Army of the Western region, 56 were killed in the battle. The rioters also set fire and looted the residential area, causing 12 houses to be burned down and 48 civilians to die. Roland said in a deep voice, "Here I apologize to the people of Longsong Stronghold. As the guardian of the territory, I failed to fulfill my responsibility." The prince's words caused a commotion among the crowd. It was obvious that no one had ever heard of the royal family apologizing to the people. Many people were shocked and astonished, but in Roland's eyes, this was just the attitude that a lord should have. He did not have the unreasonable arrogance and self-esteem of the nobles. If he did not put the people in his eyes, the people would not truly support the people who led them. This was also repeatedly proven by history. I guarantee that everyone's blood will not be spilled in vain. Not only would the fallen soldiers receive a generous burial, but their families would also receive a pension of 5 golden dragons. Moreover, they could also receive a portion of food and charcoal from the city hall every month as additional compensation. This standard is exactly the same as the First Army of the Western region, and I hereby promise that the new subjects of the Second Army will also receive the same treatment. The cheers were few and far between. It was obvious that most of the people in the fortress were skeptical about the generous compensation. After all, embezzlement were common occurrences. Even the winter relief rations were mixed with sand and leaves, let alone the golden dragon. However, Roland had already thought of a way to deal with it. Since it was a publicity event, he naturally had to make it a hot topic. He clapped his hands, and Perrault, Iron Axe, and 2 soldiers of the First Army carrying a box walked up to the stage. At this moment, I have a list of the deceased in my hands. Now the governor of Longsong's stronghold, Perrault Hull, will personally distribute the pension to you. As the soldiers poured all the golden coins in the box on the table, the people's reaction became enthusiastic. Second Army, Gun Battalion, 1st Squad, Aya. Second Army Gun Battalion, 1st Squad, Iron Pillar. Iron Axe slowly read the names on the list. One by one, the family members went up to the stage and excitedly received the golden dragon. They bowed and knelt down. The scene was a little chaotic. Roland even felt Nightingale's hand on his waist. Fortunately, despite the chaos, no accidents happened in the end. When the pension was finally distributed, it was already close to noon. Roland waved his arm to silence the noisy discussion in the theater. Those who are homeless because of the war will also be given shelter and food rations. Until the end of the months of demons, there will be special personnel to distribute them to you. Then, Your Highness, what about after the end of the months of demons? Someone asked loudly. Of course, the questioner was created by echo. At that time, City Hall will provide a lot of jobs. Not only will you have a good salary, but you will also enjoy it. As long as you are willing to work, you will never have to worry about food. Roland raised his right hand and said loudly, The Western region will not forget those who have sacrificed for it, and neither will I. This time, the reaction of the crowd was much more enthusiastic. Everyone raised their right hands in response to the prince's declaration. Amidst the cheers of his subjects, Roland timely ordered his men to distribute meat porridge, which pushed the atmosphere to a new high. In the afternoon, more people gathered in the theater. Not only were all the seats occupied, but many people even squatted in the aisles. Obviously, they were all here for the afternoon trial. It seemed that people all over the world, and even the other world, loved to watch how the prisoners were punished. Roland handed over the hosting duties to Iron Axe and Perrault. He sat in the luxury box on the second floor of the theater, and also became an audience. The result of the trial had long been decided. The prisoners were dragged onto the stage and lined up in a row in front of the people. Behind them stood solemn soldiers with guns. Iron Axe announced the charges and Perrault read the verdict. Then the soldiers escorted them to the execution ground, which was the square of Stronghold. When some of the victims' families saw their enemies, they also rushed up to fight. As long as it was not life-threatening, the First Army would not stop them. No one pitied these villains. They should have expected such a day when they burned, killed, and looted. In the end, a total of 132 people were sentenced to death. 6 of them were great nobles, and the rest were mercenaries, guards, and servants. The execution methods were also different. Due to the limited number of gallows, only the nobles could enjoy this treatment. The others were all executed by shooting. This was also the first time that firearms were used to execute people. Although the remaining 900 people had participated in the rebellion, their hands were not stained with blood, so they were imprisoned and were waiting to be sent to the North Slope mine in batches. At this point, the resistance of the nobles in the western region was completely wiped out. The next day, Roland summoned all the innocent nobles to the castle hall. Clearing the obstacles was just the beginning. He still had a lot of work to do if he wanted to really rule this place. Chapter 457. In order to calm the uneasiness of the nobles, Roland specially arranged a sumptuous banquet. A long table covered with a white cloth was placed in the center of the hall. The nobles who came sat facing each other, and in the middle were all kinds of dishes, wine and flowers. After 2 glasses of red wine, the atmosphere was much more relaxed. Moreover, the major nobles had all fallen, and the honeysuckle and the elks were on Roland's side. The remaining minor nobles were even less likely to jump out at such a time. Instead, they expressed their intention to join Roland's side. In this situation, Roland knew it was time to put his new order on the table. After eating and drinking, he distributed the small booklets that he had prepared in advance to the nobles. It was the publicity album that he had carefully prepared. "Your Highness, what is this?" As expected, soon a noble asked in surprise, "Why are the paintings so realistic?" "Yes, they're almost real. They don't look like paintings. No paint can express such delicate colors." As expected of the nobles in the big city, it was obvious that these people had a certain appreciation for paintings. Roland clapped his hands and smiled. They are indeed painted by a painter, but if there's anything different, it's that the painter is a witch, and the paint she used is omnipresent magic. These words made the nobles stiffen, and they did not know whether to put down the booklets in their hands or not. "The power of the local church has disappeared. What are you worried about?" The prince raised his eyebrows. "Witches are no different from us. I've verified this many times." Ahem. Ahem. Perrault almost choked. "You're right, Your Highness." As expected of Prince Roland, haha. Haha. The other nobles also laughed awkwardly. It seems that I've said something quite ambiguous." Roland pretended to be nonchalant and changed the topic. After more than a year as a prince, he found that his level of calmness, or rather, the thickness of his skin had increased by leaps and bounds. The pictures are just to make the content more vivid. The main point is the story. They continued to read a few more pages. Aurelia, the little girl from the elk family, quickly raised her head and asked, "Is this the family history of a noble?" "Aurelia," Ren reminded her in a low voice. "Call him His Highness." "Yes, he used to be a noble of the western region." Roland made an okay gesture. "Some of you should remember him." "Your Highness, I know him," a knight said. "Sir Pine, he is my neighbor. Our territories used to be next to each other." "I've seen him too," another man recalled. "I think he was a baron. His father was Joey Cole's vassal. Ever since Lord Joey left the western region, his territory has declined." "Viscount Tigu is currently in Border Town," Roland said with a smile. "And this album is a record of how I got to know him, as well as what happened afterwards. As you can see, he is a noble living under the new system. He is currently busy practicing his flintlock. It is estimated that after the end of the months of demons, he will take his daughter and attendants to the misty forest to enjoy the fun of hunting. As far as I know, since he sold the territory east of Stronghold and settled down in Border Town, not only has his title been promoted, but his family property has also increased several times. Fear came from the unknown, and so did resistance to the change of the system, because they did not know what kind of impact the change would have on them." Roland asked Soroya to depict the life of Pine in a small town in the form of a comic, as an example for his own propaganda, in order to reduce the resistance and fear of the nobles. Compared to those dry and boring biographies, the expression of a comic was obviously more vivid. "You should all know that I am about to build a city in the western region. In fact, I have been preparing this plan for a long time. When the time comes, Border Town, Long Song Stronghold, and the long and narrow land between the two places will be integrated into one." Roland continued, "Some people will ask, how can the two towns be connected to each other when they are so far away from each other? First of all, the overall meaning refers to the administrative, that is to say, the new city will implement the same law, the same policy, This is also the reason why I want to take back the nobles' enfeoffment and lawmaking rights. Your Highness, then our territory? Someone asked. It will still belong to you, he interrupted. I said, taking back these rights doesn't mean that you will lose anything. The essence of enfeoffment is to hand over your territory to others to form your own inferior nobles. In this way, you can strengthen your own power, resist the enemy together, or fight together to seize benefits. Under the new system, the task of resisting foreign enemies will be completed by a professional army. As long as you do things according to the rules, you will earn far more than in the past. After all, compared to dividing a little cake, it is better to make the cake bigger. Seeing that everyone was silent, Roland smiled and said, You have never been to Border Town, so it is normal that you don't know how big the cake can be. In fact, in the second half of the year, the town's financial revenue reached as much as 30,000 golden dragons. If it were not for the early arrival of the months of the demons, this number is likely to increase by about 10,000. The nobles all gasped, 30,000? Roland had already learned from Perrault about the financial situation of Stronghold over the years. The annual income of City Hall was no more than this amount, not to mention these small nobles. 100 golden dragons was a huge sum of money for them. And as the future managers of all industries here, you will naturally get rich returns from it. He raised the corner of his mouth. Back to the construction of the city, in addition to the administrative unification, in terms of geography, the two towns will gradually move closer. For example, it only took me 1 day to go from Border Town to Longsong Stronghold. When the construction of Kingdom Avenue is completed, the time on land will also be reduced to 1 day. If you ride a horse or a bicycle, it will only take you half a day, not to mention faster transportation. What is a bicycle? Aurelia asked curiously. A human-powered riding tool that runs very fast on flat ground. The prince said with a smile, I dare say that in 3 years we will be able to have breakfast in Stronghold and then go to Border Town to work. Because the Kingdom Avenue was a straight line, the distance between the two places was shortened to 60 kilometers, which would only take half an hour by rail or car. However, most of the nobles did not pay attention to this. The knight, who claimed to be Sir Pine's neighbor, asked cautiously, Your Highness, what you just said, do you want us to manage Stronghold? Yes and no, Roland said with a smile. As I said before, after the construction of the city, the two places will be administratively integrated. Stronghold will be transformed into a district of the city, under the jurisdiction of the Central City Hall. But for now, a day's journey is still too long, so I will set up a subordinate city hall in Longsong District, which will be divided into many subordinate departments according to the current model of Border Town. You will work in these departments and be responsible for the specific matters here. Subordinate departments? The nobles looked confused. Chapter 458. After explaining the administrative integration plan, Roland picked up his teacup and slowly took a few sips, waiting for everyone to digest it. A large number of people were needed to maintain the daily operation of an area. Before the literacy rate was raised, it was inevitable to pull in the nobles. After all, most of them had received primary education and were slightly involved in management. If there were outstanding people, he did not mind sending them out to manage a city, or even a territory, similar to the mayors and governors of later generations. After a few minutes, Roland began to explain the next problem. That was to fight crime. In his New Order concept, there was no place for black street organizations in the city, and everyone could find a job that could support them without robbing others. If it was a highly developed modern city, he was not sure that he could do this, because the population of tens of millions of people and the saturation of low-level positions would lead to a large number of unemployed people. But in the western region, including Longsong Stronghold and the entire suburban territory, there were only 60 to 70,000 people, and the infrastructure was still a blank. As long as they were willing to work, there was no need to worry about not having a job. How much do you know about the rats? Do you mean the Black Street rats? Renmed coughed twice. I have dealt with them. What kind of dealings? Roland asked with interest. This. Ren seemed a little embarrassed. I used to be the leader of the Inferno gang, and I competed with several other rat gangs for territory. Pfft. Several people on the scene could not help but burst out laughing. Roland was also surprised for a moment. A second son of the Count was actually a rat? And the Inferno gang? This name was too unstylish. He began to doubt whether this person was really the son of Count Med. Your Highness, the truth is, Perrault explained. A few years ago, the Black Street forces in the dock area were very rampant. Almost every day, civilians and foreign merchants were killed, but the patrols turned a blind eye. Sir Ren could not stand it anymore, so he took his guards to the refugee area to win over a group of people, and drove the rats out of the dock area. At that time, he also wrote letters about the daily battle and sent them to me, who was far away in King's City. In his letter, he said that this was a great battle, no less than the battle against the demonic beasts, so I think. Perrault, stop it, Ren said shyly. I was just bored at the time, so I was looking for some fun to kill time. So that's how it is. This is probably a feat, done by a noble who was passionate about the game of knight during his middle school years. Roland thought. For the second son of the Elk, who loved fighting since childhood, there was nothing more exciting than having a group of subordinates behind him. Although it was not like commanding an army of thousands of men and horses, when two groups of people fought, it was not bad at all. What about this gang now? I don't know. Ren scratched the back of his head. Ever since I joined the Hermes defense line to fight against the real demonic beasts, I haven't contacted that group of people. Roland nodded. In fact, I intend to eradicate all the rats in Stronghold, so that every civilian can live a stable life. Your Highness, with all due respect, Ren said hesitantly, I'm afraid I can't do that. Why? He frowned. I have the First Army. Are the rats more difficult to deal with than the noble knight? That's not the case. Roland seemed to be choosing his words carefully. They are weak and timid, lack weapons and armor, and don't know how to fight in a battle formation. They can't even withstand a single blow from the knight, but if you deal with them according to the way you deal with rebels, whether they were rats or not, I'm afraid that there will be only a few civilians left in Stronghold. You mean? Rats and civilians are constantly changing, Your Highness, Ren replied respectfully. When the harvest is bad and the months of demons are long, many civilians have to do what the rats do to survive. This is also the reason why most lords allow Black Street to exist. Compared to starving civilians, it's better to let them fight among themselves. Roland's face darkened. He did not expect the rats to appear in this way. What about their organizers? These people are habitual criminals. Some of them are supported by the local nobles, and some are exiled criminals from other places. Very well, I don't think any of you are raising rats. The prince glanced around the long table with a cold face, and the nobles all lowered their heads. But it doesn't matter if you are. As long as you cooperate with me in the cleanup operation from today onwards, I can let bygones be bygones. He paused and then looked at Renee. I have a task for you. Yes, Your Highness. In the next month, I will focus on cracking down on all crimes in Stronghold, and you need to cooperate with the First Army to eliminate the leaders of the gangs in Black Street and completely disintegrate all the rats. As for the specific measures, I will arrange for someone to inform you. Your Highness, what about the members? Without the food provided by the organization, it will be difficult for them to survive the months of demons. Ren said worriedly. Plus this year's months of demons came earlier. The number of these people may be more than in previous years. I will ask Perrault to open the warehouse and continue to provide food until the end of the months of demons. Your Highness, you can't do that. You will only make them worse if you feed them. That's right. I'm afraid everyone in the city will become beggars. Hearing this, the nobles all spoke up to stop him. Roland banged the table hard. I've decided. You don't have to say anything more. He felt that the biggest difference between himself and the nobles was that they always assumed the worst of the people, thinking that the people were lazy, ignorant, incompetent, despicable, greedy, and hopeless. But he was very clear about the power of the people. This group seemed stupid, but in fact only by giving them the right guidance and setting an example could they become the backbone of this world. If the people were as useless as the nobles thought, how could they change the whole world again and again? In fact, spending energy on the people was the most worthwhile investment. Even the tiniest change could bring him amazing returns. Finally, we need to publicize the decree as soon as possible. Roland looked at Perrault. You have experience in this, so continue to expand it. If the people can't understand the notice, find someone to read it. The content is everything we talked about today. Everything? The latter was startled. Even the plan to clean up the rats? That's right, including the news of the opening of the warehouse. He looked around at the crowd again. Let me first teach you a prerequisite for a qualified city hall operation, which is to inform the people of the policy in advance, answer their questions, and listen to their feedback. In this way, the policy will not become a piece of paper. Chapter 459. In fact, you don't have to accompany me. Echo walked along the Redwater River, the snow under her feet making squeaking sounds. The city isn't safe, this isn't Border Town. Iron Axe walked behind her, keeping a distance of 2 steps. Moreover, His Highness told me that if you leave the castle and there aren't any other witches around, I should protect you. If I had known, I wouldn't have told him. She exhaled white air. Besides, you don't need to use honorifics with me. In my heart, you will always be the chief of the Wuxia clan, Lady Drow Silvermoon. At the mention of Wuxia, Echo fell silent. Although Iron Axe could not see her expression, he could feel that she was in low spirits. He wanted to say a few words of comfort, but he did not know where to start. In the end, he could only shut his mouth and silently followed her. Compared with the meandering Redwater River in the wild, this tributary almost became a straight line after entering the city. The embankments on both sides were paved with bricks, which were flat and tidy. Every 10 steps, there was a staircase leading to the river, probably for people to fetch water. Today's snow was not too heavy, so they occasionally met 1 or 2 pedestrians on the road. Whether they were men or women, they all looked at Echo in surprise. Obviously, Lady Silvermoon's tall figure and light brown skin were somewhat special, coupled with her long blue-gray hair, especially eye-catching. In the inland of Grey Castle, it was rare to see a pure-blooded Sand Nation. Let's go to the other side. Echo obviously did not like being looked at like this. Yes. They found an arch bridge, carefully crossed the frozen bridge, and came to the east side of the stronghold. There were few houses here, and the farmland was covered with snow. At first glance, it was all flat land. The blue city wall in the distance was partly visible in the snow, forming a sharp contrast with the west side. I've never seen such a scene in Iron Sand City. Echo sighed. Before leaving the southernmost region, I thought the whole continent was the same. Except for sand, there was only sand, and water and oases were resources that had to be fought for with lives. But here, no one will bleed for the Redwater River. When you want to drink water, you just have to squat down. But they will bleed for other things, Iron Axe said in a low voice. The Golden Dragon gems honor status, there is no escape from the struggle. Is that so? But Nightingale told me that she believes that Your Highness can stop disputes. She raised her head and looked at the gray sky. Whether it's the Sand Nation or the mainland kingdom, whether it's an ordinary person or a witch, they can all enjoy equal resources and live freely. I don't know. Iron Axe hesitated for a moment. He really couldn't imagine everyone putting aside their barriers and living together. Even someone like His Highness, who had mastered the power of God, might not be able to do so. He could undoubtedly conquer all his enemies, but could he make them willingly accept his rule? No matter what methods His Highness used, the seeds of hatred had been planted in the process of conquering them. Do you want to go back to Iron Sand City? Echo suddenly asked. No, Lady Silvermoon. Iron Axe came to his senses and replied without hesitation. I have sworn to the 3 gods that I will always serve His Highness Roland Wimbledon as my master and expand his territory. But you can rest assured that since he has promised to avenge you, he will certainly do so in the future. When you return to Iron Sand City, no one will dare to disrespect you. But I don't want to be the chief of the Wuxia clan, she whispered. I like to stay in places where the trees are evergreen, and I like to be with Vendi and Nightingale, and I like the songs His Highness taught me. I hope to go back one day, but I don't want to live in the desert and fight for water. Even so, in my heart, you are still the only successor of the Wuxia clan." Iron Axe didn't say what was in his heart, but bowed his head and said, "No one can force you." The two walked through the white fields and came to an open area. Echo stopped and said, "Let's practice here, we shouldn't disturb others." Iron Axe knew that Echo's ability was to make all kinds of sounds. She usually practiced in the back garden of the castle in Border Town. This time, in order to avoid disturbing the important meeting between His Highness and the nobles, she deliberately came here to use her ability. He nodded and took 2 steps back. "I'll be on guard for you. By the way, I wrote a song for my hometown." Echo turned around. "Do you want to listen to it?" "A song?" Iron Axe was slightly surprised. "Yes, I used the arrangement method that Your Highness taught me to mix the sounds of various instruments together to make the melody more layered." Speaking of this, Huayin's expression was clearly much more relaxed. "After trying it, I realized that a song can actually be so pleasant to listen to. Every addition of a different timbre will give it a completely different feeling. I don't know where Your Highness learned these methods from. When I was sold to King City, I never heard any nobles talk about it. His Highness Roland has always been different. He is the god's favorite," Iron Axe thought. "Yes, there has never been a person who treats the witches as sincerely as he does," Echo said with deep sympathy. "But the names that His Royal Highness gave to those mixed methods are too strange. It's as if they were completely unrelated things together, such as electronic music, agricultural heavy metal." She smiled and shook her head. "I think that only he could come up with such names." Before Iron Axe had time to reply, the song had already started. When the mixed music flowed into his ears, he suddenly froze in place. This was such an incredible tune, like sand brushing across an oasis, or like orange fire leaping up from the ground. At that moment, Iron Axe felt that he had returned to the desert under the scorching sun. Is this an illusion? He looked down and found that the snow had disappeared. He didn't know when, but he was in an oasis. Looking out, the scorching sand covered his entire field of vision. The woman in front of him had her eyes slightly closed. The song echoed in the blue sky. Her feet were standing in a shallow water, and the ripples were slowly spreading. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Passing through the sand and dust following the traces of the oasis, your footprints are left in the sea of sand. Your silhouette is reflected in the clear spring. One day, the oasis will become a new desert and a new oasis will grow in the desert, but the only thing that will not change is the legend about you. One of these days you will walk in your footprints, looking for your silhouette before the dawn breaks, that tossing and turning silent moment. Chapter 460. When Roland heard Iron Axe's report, he wondered if there was something wrong with his ears for a moment. "You said you saw a vast desert in Echo's song, and brought back a grain of sand from the desert? If it was just an auditory hallucination, could it still be considered a song?" "I didn't bring it back, Your Highness." Iron Axe solemnly put the grain of sand on the desk. "I was in a daze at that time, and didn't even think to check if the scene was real. It seemed to have suddenly appeared in my hand. If I had to describe it, it should be the flying sand brought by the hot wind." Roland thought for a moment and asked, "She only sang this one song?" "There were some other songs, but I couldn't listen to them at all," Iron Axe recalled. "The scene was like a miracle. If it was before, I would have believed Lady Silvermoon even if she claimed to be the 3 gods' emissary." "Your Highness, did her ability evolve?" Iron Axe had followed Roland for more than a year, so he obviously had a certain understanding of witches. "It should be, but it's also the first time I've encountered such a situation." Roland thought for a moment, and decided to call Echo over to ask her personally. After Iron Axe left, Roland picked up the grain of sand and carefully looked at it. "Is this a magic creation?" "I'm not sure," Nightingale said behind him. "There are no traces of magic on it." No traces of magic did not mean that it was not an object created by magic. It was just that this kind of material existed in reality, and did not need to be maintained by magic, nor would it be affected by the god stone of retaliation. For example, Soroya's paintings. Echo soon came to the study. Nightingale immediately appeared beside Roland and smiled at her. Congratulations. Echo was startled. Me. Nightingale nodded. The magic in your body has condensed. Didn't you notice? Really? Echo said in surprise. Does this mean my ability has evolved? What does it look like? Roland thought to himself. A blue transparent crystal, as clear as water, replied Nightingale. Its magic power is equal to that of Maggie. It seemed that this evolution had nothing to do with the epiphany. Instead, it had unknowingly completed the condensation. After Roland told Echo about Iron Axe's experience in the illusion, she seemed very surprised. You said he seemed to have returned to the southernmost region, and was in the middle of the Sea of Sand? The word as if is worth considering, because when he returned from the desert, he had an extra grain of sand on him. Roland laughed. Although sand can be found everywhere, he wouldn't go as far as to dig through the snow and find a grain of sand in the mud to deceive me. He paused. What did you see at the time? Nothing. Queen replied, a little embarrassed. I closed my eyes at that time and didn't notice the changes in my surroundings. Then show us now, Roland said, holding his chin with great interest. Use the song from your hometown that you created. Here? Yes, he affirmed. There's still an hour before dinner. It won't affect anyone else. I also want to hear a song that can make people feel immersed, added Nightingale excitedly. Well, all right. Queen took a deep breath. Soon, a mixed sonata that did not belong to this era began to play. The sweet voice of a woman echoed in the study. At first, she was a little reserved, probably because she had never sung indoors before. But as the tune gradually reached its climax, she was completely immersed in the music. Roland seemed to have heard the sound of a hot wind blowing through the green forest. The temperature in the room seemed to have increased by a few degrees, and his nose also smelled of the sand being baked by the scorching sun. When the aftertaste slowly dissipated, Roland thought about it for a long time before he recovered from the music. There was no doubt that this was a lyrical song full of exotic flavor. For a tone-deaf person like him, there was no fault at all. However, he did not see the vast desert. He was still sitting in the study, and there was no trace of the oasis with the trickling stream. He looked at Nightingale, who shook her head. Obviously, she did not see the strange illusion either. Did the ability not work? Did you only write this song? Asked Roland. Yes. Queen nodded. Then sing a few more songs I taught you. He thought for a moment and decided. Let everyone come and listen. Soon, the study was full of witches. Even the 3 witches from Sleeping Island rushed over, although they still had a stack of cards in their hands. Queen was a little nervous, but with Vendy's encouragement, she slowly regained her composure and sang all the songs, including the gorilla song. And without exception, these songs were warmly applauded by the witches. After asking about the feelings of the witches, Roland had a general judgment in his heart. That was, the degree to which one would be influenced by the song depended on the listener's subjective experience. Those who had the same experience as the atmosphere of the song would be more influenced. Based on the modern songs that Roland had taught the witches, everyone had the best response to the gorilla song. After thinking about it, it was only because the witches had seen the first army marching to the beat of the drums that they could better understand the meaning of the song. Iron Axe, who was a sand nation, could naturally strongly resonate with the music full of the southernmost region. However, for the time being, Roland could not know how deep this influence could reach. If the listener was completely immersed in it, would everything in the illusion become real? But in any case, Huayi's new abilities still made him look forward to it, such as encouraging the soldiers, calming the masses, and cooperating with future theatrical performances. The role of a person who could arouse the audience's emotions was immeasurable. In the afternoon of the next day, Roland summoned Vader from Border Town to his study. Your Highness. I'm here. Vader's teeth were chattering. Obviously, he had not recovered from the high-speed flight. Now, the only mode of transportation to and fro between the 2 places was Maggie Express. Of course, even if he was wrapped in a thick blanket, flying under the claws of a giant beast at 60 kilometers per hour against the cold wind was still not a comfortable experience. Good job. Roland patted the fat pigeon on his shoulder. Coo. The pigeon proudly raised its head. I called you here because I want you to assist the nobles of the elk family in training a team. He looked at Vader. The situation here is different from Border Town. There are rats, refugees, and vicious criminals. It's somewhat similar to Valencia. Vader baked himself by the fireplace for a while and finally stopped trembling. You mean, you want me to form a patrol team? No, it's the police. Roland explained the crackdown plan. The First Army will lead the operation in the first half, but the security of Stronghold will still be maintained by the police. As a policeman, the most important thing is to protect the people. Treat the people as harmonious as the spring breeze, and treat criminals as merciless as thunder. Vader could not help but repeat. Chapter 461. As long as the months of demons did not end, the streets and alleys of Stronghold were always deserted. Even the ubiquitous rats would curl up and hide in their respective territories, sharing the food that had been saved in the autumn, and waiting for new prey to appear when the weather returned. That was how it should have been. Damn it, why do I have to go through the wind and snow to listen to the policy speech? Snaketooth spat on the ground angrily. It's none of our business what the big bosses are going to do. Pull up your collar. He looked at Joe, who was shivering beside him. If you get the cold plague, you'll die. He shouldn't have come out with us. Sunflower frowned. Why do we need 4 people to get information? Kanas is targeting us. Save it. So what if he's targeting us? Tiger Claw, who was the strongest among them, said disapprovingly. He's our food source. Although he said so, he still quickened his pace and stood in front of the other 3. Snaketooth suddenly felt the cold wind lessen. Thank you, Joe whispered. But when it came to Kanas, everyone was a little discouraged. There were different levels among the rats, from the king at the top to the tail at the bottom. They occupied different areas. Kanas was neither a king nor a tail. He was the manager of the Endless Alley in the western district of the outer city. To be precise, he should be the waist, or the belly. But no matter who he was, Snaketooth and the others had to respectfully call him boss when they saw him. There were 6 managers like him in the western district. As for the boss, who was also the king of the western district, Snaketooth had never seen him. Kanas had several groups of rats under his command, and they were one of them. There was no doubt that the more powerful they were, the more favored they would be by the managers. Unfortunately, as street children in the alley, they were outnumbered. Even when they fought, their arms and legs were much thinner than their opponents, so they were naturally at a disadvantage. Of course, Tiger Claw was an exception. His figure did not seem to have grown by eating only half a piece of black bread a day. As for Brown Girl Sunflower's targeting, they were even more unlucky. A witch had appeared in the alley. Snaketooth had wanted to use her ability to exchange for some money, but he did not expect to meet a big shot from the elk family. In the end, not only did he not earn much money, he even lost the witch. It was precisely because of this that Kanas was particularly angry with them. He felt that if they had handed the witches over to him earlier, it would have been better to sell them to the nobles or the church. He's just saying it, Snaketooth said disdainfully. Sell it to the church for 25 golden dragon? Where was he going to find those fake priests? The church was in ruins. The nobles wouldn't hand over the golden dragon to a rat. He wouldn't even be alive to get the money. Snaketooth is right, said Joe trembling. If we really made him lose 25 golden dragon, he would have thrown our bodies into the Redwater River. Kanas would only dare to hand over the witches to the king of the western district. And he has to be wary of the witch's unpredictable ability. He doesn't have a godstone of retaliation, Snaketooth continued. That guy just doesn't like us. What do you mean by that? She's paper. She's one of us. Sunflower pinched Snaketooth hard. Do you still want to treat her as a commodity? She suddenly paused. Hey, you didn't sell her at that time, did you? I didn't. He shouted. I tried my best to protect her, but the other party was the Lord of the Castellan. I don't know if she's doing well in Border Town. Tiger Claw sighed. How good can she be? Sunflower snorted. What's the difference between being played by a prince and being played by a noble? Really? You make it sound good, but when you see the life of a noble, I'm afraid you'll be eager to be played by a great noble. Snaketooth twitched his mouth. When they arrived at the square of Stronghold, the four of them were surprised to find that there was a wooden platform and a bonfire. There were about 200 or 300 people around the platform, which was a rare sight on a snowy day. There's actually someone preaching here. Tigerclaw clicked his tongue. What kind of game do those nobles want to play? It's definitely not good news. Snaketooth shrugged. I guess they want to levy taxes? Or they want to hire able-bodied men. Didn't they have a fight before? Anyway, it's none of our business, Sunflower said. Let's finish listening and go back early. Joe, go to the bonfire and warm yourself up. Okay. Snaketooth walked around the crowd to the edge of the platform. The man standing on the platform was wearing a thick cotton-padded jacket, a woolen hood, and a pair of deerskin gloves. He felt warm just by looking at him. Compared with the dirty and old linen clothes he was wearing, it was like heaven and earth. It would be great if I could find a chance to snatch it. But he also knew that this was just his imagination. The elk-pattern cloak behind the preacher indicated his identity. The attendants of the four noble families were not people a rat could afford to offend. Aren't you going to warm yourselves by the bonfire with Joe? I can listen to the preaching alone. Snaketooth looked at the other two. Really? Tigerclaw raised his eyebrows. Of course. I have a good memory. He pointed to his head. I can remember words, people, and grudges. Pfft. Lotus sneered. Look at you. Since you said so, I won't stand on ceremony. Let's go, big guy. But you have to give me more dinner. We'll see. I don't know if there will be any dinner today. She waved her hand. After the two left, Snaketooth patted his cold cheeks and turned his attention back to the wooden platform. The news was meaningless to the bottom rat tail, but in the eyes of Belly and King, it might be a chance to make a profit. Of course, even if they could get something, there was almost nothing left for the people below. Dear citizens, this is a joint announcement from His Highness Roland Wimbledon, Earl of Elk, Shalafi Hull, and Consul of Longsong Stronghold, Perot Hull. The speaker took a sip of hot ale and said loudly with a piece of parchment in his hand, City Hall of Stronghold has opened the market for grain purchase. Citizens who have extra grain at home can sell it at the market at any time. But please note that from next month, any act of selling grain privately will be regarded as a felony. Only City Hall has the right to buy and sell grain. Once you are arrested for selling grain privately, you will be severely punished. City Hall also welcomes any citizen's report. If the report is verified, you will be rewarded with 25 silver royals. Snaketooth opened his mouth wide in surprise. He did not expect to hear such shocking news as soon as he arrived. Those nobles actually wanted to ban the sale of grain. Moreover, the prices given by City Hall for buying and selling grain were very low. The early arrival of the months of demons had caused the price of grain in Stronghold to rise step by step, and now it was about 3 times the market price. Obviously, the price of grain would not fall as long as the heavy snow did not stop. According to the new price, no one would be willing to sell grain to City Hall at a low price. However much grain the other side sold, the nobles and merchants would be able to buy it. Didn't the prince and the castellan consider this problem? Chapter 462. However, Snaketooth did not expect that something even more unbelievable was yet to come. The speaker's next message made him unable to move his feet. 5 days later, in the second week of the first month of spring, City Hall will distribute relief rations in the square. Everyone will receive 2 portions of hot oatmeal, 1 for lunch and 1 for evening. Citizens, let's thank His Highness for his kindness. Hearing this, there was a sudden uproar in the crowd. Gosh, Gower didn't lie. There's really such a thing in the announcement. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm it. Did I hear that right? Oatmeal every day? You're coming too? Don't you have a lot of oatmeal and jerky? That's still 2 portions for free. The guardian didn't forbid me from receiving them. Didn't you hear what he said? Everyone. Sir. Someone suddenly asked loudly. Is the oatmeal really free? When will it be distributed? This was also the question that most people were concerned about. The crowd immediately stopped talking and looked at the noble's attendant. The latter waited until the crowd's anticipation was met before he calmly said, "That's right. The oatmeal is indeed free, and it will be distributed until the end of the months of demons. Go and tell more neighbors and friends about this news. His Highness' promise will definitely come true." Hundreds of people were instantly excited, but Snaketooth still could not believe his ears. What did it mean to provide food for free? They could temporarily get rid of the threat of Khanas, and no longer have to worry about starving to death in the cold snow. No, not only them, but all the rats could easily obtain food. In this way, King and Belly would not be able to control their tails. Khanas would never sit back and watch this happen. What would he do? Send someone to disperse the crowd and disturb the porridge distribution? Or bribe the city hall officials to pour the oatmeal into the Redwater River? However, Snaketooth also noticed that the speaker repeatedly mentioned His Highness, which meant that the one requesting for relief rations this time was the legendary Prince Roland, not the Duke or the 5 families of the past. Would he let these rat kings do whatever they wanted, or was he really different from the other nobles? He did not want to trust any nobles. The scene where paper was cheated away was still vivid in his mind. But there was a voice in his heart that kept asking himself, what if it's true? What if it's true? Fortunately, this doubt did not last long, because the elk attendant on the stage had already begun to announce the next piece of news. He originally thought that these decrees were just new tricks that the lords came up with to torment the citizens, and that they had nothing to do with a homeless child like him. However, the first 2 pieces of news surprised him greatly, and the third piece of news pointed directly at the rats. "Citizens, listen up, your good days are coming." The speaker first calmed the noisy crowd with a few words, and then said word by word, "In 5 days, starting from the porridge day, His Royal Highness will launch a severe crackdown on crime in Longsong Stronghold, including the elimination of black street organizations, cracking down on theft and robbery, as well as all illegal activities that threaten the lives and property of the citizens. When the time comes, don't linger in Black Street, and don't go to taverns, casinos, or other places to avoid unnecessary harm. The order of Stronghold needs to be maintained by all citizens. Now the City Hall is recruiting people, including public security personnel and police officers. Now I'll explain the recruitment requirements in detail." Snaketooth was no longer in the mood to listen. He squeezed out of the crowd and quickly ran to the bonfire. "Hurry, let's go back." "Are you done?" Sunflower rubbed her hands and said reluctantly, "You should also warm yourself up before you go." "No, let's go now," he said anxiously. "What's the matter?" said Joe, sensing something was amiss. "I'll explain it to you on the way." Snaketooth stamped his foot. "We have to hurry back, or we'll be dead when Khanas hears the news from someone else." The gathering place of the Western Rats was located in a 2-story house deep in the endless alley. Khanas was a strong one-eyed man with a ferocious face. His temper and methods were as cruel as his face. Snaketooth had seen him nail one of his men to the wall and whip him to death after he messed up the job. In addition, he was in charge of the food supply of several rat groups on the street, so no one dared to disrespect him. Snaketooth was the same. He carefully knelt in front of Khanas and repeated the news he had heard. "Lord Castellan wants to attack us?" Khanas frowned. "What's going on?" "Not Lord Castellan," Snaketooth cautiously reminded him. "That man has been talking about His Highness. You know nothing." He spat. "No matter how powerful a noble is, he can't do anything in someone else's territory. This is Longsong Stronghold, not Border Town or King City. Without the approval of the Elk family, he can't do anything. So what if he's the nominal guardian of the Western region? Just look at who's sitting in the castle. That king is still nominally in charge of Grey Castle. Who cares about his orders?" "You're right," a woman next to Khanas said in a sweet voice. "Besides, even if there's a change in power, it has nothing to do with us. Nobles are nobles and rats are rats. Don't be fooled by the fact that both of them are in the same city. Rats are rats? I like what you said." Khanas pinched the woman's butt. "But the second news is a little strange. In the past, the nobles would inform us in advance if they want to earn a good reputation by giving out food. And if they want to give out food, they'll give out a limited amount. Why does it sound like they're going to feed everyone in the city? No one could answer this question, but Snaketooth knew that everyone was thinking about the 2 free bowls of oatmeal. Could it be that the Lord wants to get some benefits from Lord Bloody Hand? The woman chuckled. Who knows? Kana shrugged. I'll ask the boss later. He's the only one who knows about the nobles. The so-called Bloody Hand was the king of the western region. It was said that he was close to some small nobles. In a sense, he could no longer be regarded as a pure rat, but an underground noble without a title. In fact, every king had similar connections. Thinking of this, Snaketooth could not help but sigh. He knew that Kana's little lover was right. The nobles had existed for hundreds of years, and so had the rats. No matter how things changed in power, the underground world always had its own set of rules. His Highness was also a noble, so what could he change? Chapter 463. This was the strangest team Ren Med had ever seen. A detailed map of Longsong Stronghold was placed on a square table in the hall on the first floor of the castle. There were 6 people around the table. They were the commander of the 1st Army Iron Axe, the police captain from Border Town Vader, the current leader of the Inferno Gang Nightingale, the head of the Security Bureau, Ashes, the black-haired witch, and himself, the Earl of the Elk family. Ren had never thought that one day he would need the help of rats, let alone cooperate with witches. Sirs, there are currently around 7 to 8 gangs of various sizes in the fortress. Lai Gu revealed a fawning smile as he bowed and said, the gang with the most members is the Sickle Gang located in the northern district of the outer city. They have around 500 to 600 members. However, the strongest gang is the Death Knell Gang in the inner city. Most of them are made up of fugitives and mercenaries. They almost don't accept ordinary civilians to join them. They have a lot of weapons and armors. Of course, if they didn't do that, they wouldn't be able to occupy the richest spot. The eastern part of the city is the territory of the Carrion Bugs and the Vulture Gang. With the convenience of the dock area, they mainly sell slaves and Dreamland water, and their methods are very cruel. I heard that these 2 rat organizations are backed by the Wolf family and the Maple family, but none of the nobles came out to help them when we, the Inferno Gang, beat them to a pulp a few years ago, he said with some pride. As for the western part of the city, the gangs are much more complicated. Because they are all small gangs, I have only dealt with their leaders. They are. The news about the gangs is not important, so there is no need to go into details, the tall Majin man interrupted. I just want to ask, can you take us to the underground rat's nest? Ahem, my lord. Lai Gu nodded to him. As the saying goes, when a rat builds a nest, there are 10 holes and 9 holes. I know the main gathering places of the gangs, but it is impossible for me to know every one of their shelters, especially those that are built with dry wells and basements. Only the leaders and their trusted followers know the specific locations. He's right about that. Ren sighed. If we fight them head-on, the rats won't be able to withstand a single blow. But if we want to wipe them out one by one, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. If we launch a sudden attack, we might still have a chance. But now that the notice has been issued, by the time the operation starts, those leaders should have already hidden themselves. Hide. The black-haired witch sneered. Unless he hides in Redwater City, as long as he stays in Stronghold, there's no one we can't find. Yes, you are right. Lai Gu wiped off the sweat on his forehead and no longer argued anymore. The pressure that this witch named Ashes gave off was really amazing. Ren had been on the battlefield and had also fought with demonic beasts and Hermes, so he knew what a real warrior was like. But even those experienced judges would be overshadowed in front of her. The other party didn't need to put on a scary appearance. Just by standing there, he was enough to make people not dare to look at him directly. There was no doubt that not only had she seen blood and taken the lives of her enemies, but she had also wandered on the edge of life and death, which was why she had such a domineering aura. According to His Highness, we still have 3 days to prepare. After the first batch of rations is distributed, the army will start from the North City Gate and clean up the rat gangs in each area. Iron Axe said in a deep voice, This operation will only target the organizers and strive to solve Black Street in the shortest time possible. But will it really work? Watching Iron Axe walk to the door of the hall, Ren could not help but ask. There has never been a city that can eliminate the rats. As long as there are people, they will not disappear. Iron Axe looked back at him and said, Really? There are no rats in Border Town. After everyone left, only Vader stayed. My lord, has anyone applied for a police position in City Hall? Not yet, but I heard from Perot that dozens of people in the Second Army have applied. Ren slowly sat down with the help of the square table, Iron Axe's words still echoing in his mind. After a while he asked in a low voice, Are there really no rats in Border Town? As for the usual Black Street organizations, there are none. Vader shrugged and said, There is no shortage of food or shelter. Both men and women can find a suitable job. Even handymen are paid enough to fill their stomachs. To be honest, before I came to Border Town, I wouldn't have believed that there was such a place in the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Why? Ren could not help but ask. I don't know, my lord. Vader spread out his hands and said, His Highness Roland's conduct is far different from that of any nobleman I've ever seen. Don't call me your lord. He waved his hand and said, His Highness asked us to work together to deal with this matter. We can put our titles aside in private. Vader nodded and did not refuse. Ren quite admired his straightforward character. Do you think His Highness can really eradicate all the rats in Stronghold and make the entire western region a clean land? I'm not sure. Vader's answer slightly surprised him. After all, I used to be a patrol captain and have dealt with rats for several years. Their existence is like a shadow under the sun. It's difficult to rely on forceful means to deal with them. But His Highness said that if it was a big city with 1 million people, he might not be able to manage it well. But if there are only 100,000 people, it's not impossible to get rid of these low-level scum. To put it simply, it's enough to make the people feel that the price of being a rat is too high. At the same time, there are many more suitable alternatives. The price is too high. Ren automatically skipped over the description of a big city with 1 million people. Just 100,000 people was already an incredibly magnificent city. This is not something that can be done in a short time. Yes, fighting against rats or crime is not something that can be done overnight. Vader nodded and said, The police is the organization established by His Highness Roland for this matter. It's completely different from the patrol team. I've already told you about this. They were indeed completely different. They were paid by the city hall and did not listen to the orders of a noble. They maintained the security and order of an area and did not associate with criminals. And most importantly, His Highness said something to me. What did he say? In fact, I've mentioned your doubts to him. Vader smiled. In the end, His Highness said to me, If you can't do it, you won't do it? Renmed suddenly felt a jolt in his heart, as if something had suddenly become clear. If you can't do it, you won't do it. If that was the case, he would not have been running on the path of a knight. Although he had taken over the title of count, and seemed to be getting further and further away from the life he liked. As long as he could continue fighting on the battlefield to protect the people, he would not be far away from the path in his heart. On the contrary, it would only become wider and wider. So that's how it is. I understand. He took a deep breath. I was also quite shocked at that time, Vader said emotionally. But I still don't understand what His Highness said at the end. Anything else? Ren asked expectantly. Chapter 464. Joe fell ill. He was the second weakest guy in the gang, and since Paper was abducted, he became the weakest. He was fine on the night he came back from the square, but the next day, Snaketooth found Joe lying motionless on the hay with a faint sound coming from his mouth. His cheeks were terribly red. He's been infected by the cold plague. Sunflower touched Joe's forehead. His head is very hot. Am I going to die? Snaketooth opened his half-closed eyes and asked softly. No one answered. Cold plague was an extremely difficult disease to deal with. Once infected, one could only rely on their body to resist the cold. However, People with good health would rarely be affected by the cold. Generally, those who got sick were weak, so very few patients could survive. For rats, being infected with cold plague was basically a death sentence. "I'm going to find Kanas," Snaketooth broke the silence. "What for?" "Ask him to give Joe more food." He stood up abruptly. "I've heard that if you catch a cold, you'll have a better chance of surviving if you can fill your stomach and keep your body warm. He won't give it to you." Tiger Claw shook his head. "We all know what kind of person he is." "That's right. Maybe he'll beat you up." Sunflower gathered the hay. "Rats don't feed useless people." "Joe isn't useless," Snaketooth retorted. "He can read. Just a few. What's the use of them to Kanas? What he wants are people who can fight, rob, steal, and dig." Snaketooth gritted his teeth, turned around, and walked straight to the room of the manager of the endless alley. He wanted to try, even if he would be beaten out by Kanas with a stick. But to his surprise, Kanas did not come back. "You're lucky," Tiger Claw grinned when he brought the news back to his companions. "Otherwise, we might have to take care of one more person." Sunflower sighed. "When we distribute the bread, let's give some to Joe. Let him eat more." But Snaketooth did not feel lucky. He faintly felt that something was wrong. It had been less than an hour since he had reported the news to Bloodhand. It could be understood that he had not returned last night to discuss countermeasures, but it was already noon today. No matter what, they should have finished discussing, right? Furthermore, he took the opportunity when his subordinates opened the door to sneak a peek inside. In the end, he discovered that not only was Kanas gone, but even his lover was gone. Not long after, the gang began to distribute food. Snaketooth noticed that it was distributed by Kanas's trusted aide this time. What he got was still half a piece of black bread. 4 days later, not only did Charles' condition not improve, but it also worsened. Yesterday he could still shout that it was cold, but today he couldn't even speak. His bright red face began to turn pale, and his breathing became weaker and weaker. "We tried our best," Sunflower rubbed her belly and said listlessly. In the past few days, they had given half of their food to Joe. If not for that, he probably wouldn't have been able to survive until now. Tiger Claw, who was usually full of energy, looked a little weak. Kanas had not shown himself for the past few days. More than 100 rats gathered in the room began to discuss this, but it was just a discussion. After all, food was still distributed as usual, but today, the noise was especially loud. Today was the day of the distribution of relief food. "I'll go to the square." Snaketooth hesitated for a long time, and finally bit his lip. "There's not enough bread for us to eat. If we can get a bowl of hot oatmeal, Joe might be able to survive." "Are you crazy?" Sunflower glared at him. "Don't forget what Kanas warned us. Do you really want your mouth to be sewn shut? The premise is that he knows that I've sneaked away. Now we don't even know where Kanas's people are. Maybe the mayor will really attack them. But his subordinates are still here. Do you think they'll let you go if they find out?" Sunflower looked at Tiger Claw. "Don't just stand there, tell me about him." "I'll go with you," Tiger Claw suddenly said. "You. Maybe the food distribution has already been ruined, or maybe the nobles just want to put on a show. If there's no food at all, it won't be a violation of Kanas's warning, right?" Tiger Claw twitched his mouth. "Besides, I'm strong enough to carry Joe back and forth. It won't take long. Kanas isn't here now, and his cronies are hiding in his room. No one will notice us." Sunflower hesitated. "You stay here," Snaketooth said. "In case someone asks, we'll have an explanation. Just say that we had diarrhea and went to find a place to squat. Don't worry, it won't take us long to come back." "All right then," she said, looking around. "Come back as soon as you can." Snaketooth and Tiger Claw slipped out of the wooden house and ran along the alley. The snowflakes under their feet soaked their trousers, and the cold wind blew on their faces like knives. Even so, they did not stop running. Panting, they rushed to the square and found that the wooden platform was surrounded by nearly 1,000 people. They were really giving out oatmeal. They hurriedly ran over, but were stopped by 2 guards in brown uniforms. "Go that way. No pushing or shoving. Otherwise, you'll be disqualified." It was not until then that Snaketooth noticed that wooden fences had been erected around the podium in the center of the square. The people were like a folded dragon, moving forward through the fences one by one. Guards with strange iron rods stood at regular intervals. They seemed to be the guardians of order. People were driven out of the line from time to time. My friend is sick. Can you help us? Please. Snaketooth knelt down in the snow. He's been hungry for days and needs food. Tigerclaw knelt down as well. What's wrong? It's the cold plague. One of them reached out and lifted the unconscious Joe. Leave him to me. You go line up. He knows the way back, right? The other guard said. Even if he doesn't, you can come here to find him. As they spoke, the guard had already carried Joe away. What should we do? Snaketooth and Tigerclaw looked at each other. No one had expected things to turn out this way. They had thought that the other party would either be indifferent or let them go around the fences to get the oatmeal first. Let's go back first, Snaketooth decided after thinking for a moment. What? Go back? Tigerclaw was surprised. We don't want the oatmeal. It'll take us at least an hour to get there. Accidents might happen if we wait too long. Snaketooth nodded. We'll sneak out in the evening to take Joe back. Tigerclaw reluctantly looked at the wooden platform where the porridge was being distributed. Well, okay. There was one thing that Snaketooth did not say. Now that the announcement of food distribution had come true, what about the other two pieces of news? Would they also come true? He had a feeling that Blackstreet was about to usher in a big change. Returning to the endless alley, the two sneaked into the house quietly, but they were suddenly shocked. They saw Sunflower hanging at the door with her hands tied behind her back. She was standing on a wobbly stool while Kana's men stood beside her and looked at the two of them with a sneer. Chapter 465. All of a sudden, Snaketooth's heart sank to the bottom. Let her go. Fear gripped his throat. He opened his mouth, but his voice was very shaky. Do you want to say let her go? Okay. One of them lifted the stool under Sunflower's feet. Her body immediately tensed up. The rope was strangled into Sunflower's neck. She kicked her feet in panic and clenched and unclenched her hands, but all her struggles were in vain. Tigerclaw rushed forward, but was hit hard on the back of his head with a stick. His whole body suddenly froze on the ground. If she hadn't waited for you to come back, she would have been dead. Kana's henchman sneered. What a good excuse. Diarrhea? You probably don't know that the boss has specially arranged people to keep an eye on you. He knows that you stray dogs are difficult to discipline. If he doesn't teach you a lesson, you will really think that the Bloody Hand Gang has no rules. I was wrong. Snaketooth knelt down and said, please let her go. She didn't even step out of this room. But this little bitch lied to me. The henchman shrugged. She also insisted that you were looking for shelter. She didn't admit it even after two of her teeth were knocked out. What's the use of keeping such a person? Give you a chance to take revenge? Snaketooth realized that he wanted to kill them. He raised his head with difficulty. Sunflower's struggle had gradually weakened, and her body began to spasm. He forced himself to look away and focus on the dagger on the waist of his henchman. There were only 5 or 6 steps between them. If he rushed up and grabbed the dagger. Just then the rope broke. Sunflower fell down without a sound. What the hell? The henchman frowned. But before he finished his words, a line of blood spurted from the side of his neck and sprayed the face of the nearest rat. Snaketooth stared at the scene in front of him, dumbfounded. His mind was blank. What the hell happened? At the same time, there were sounds of fighting outside the house. Stop. This is the territory of the Bloody Hand Gang. Someone broke in. Ah, my hand. Damn it, come out and kill her. Monster. Help. Kana's subordinates looked at each other and drew their weapons. But before they could rush out of the house, a corpse with only half a body flew in from the entrance and knocked over the 2 fellows standing at the front. Only then did Snaketooth see the attacker. It was a beautiful woman with a black ponytail tied casually behind her. She was wrapped in a black robe, and her eyes were a rare golden color. Just a glance from her made Snaketooth feel like his blood was about to freeze. Put down your weapons now, put your hands on your head and kneel down, and you'll have a chance to live. The woman stretched out 3 fingers. I'll count to 3. Those who don't do as I say will die. 3. The scene was quiet for only a few breaths of time before someone shouted, "Heavens, this kind of trash is definitely worth 100 golden dragon. Everyone, let's go. Capture her and boss will definitely reward you handsomely. Break her tendons alive. Forget it, it's better for you to die." She raised an amazingly large and strangely shaped sword and rushed toward the crowd. Snaketooth could hardly believe his eyes. That sword was actually made of iron, and any weapon that touched it would break into pieces. Even the lime powder and the hidden crossbow were rendered useless. Her speed was as fast as a whirlwind, and these normally effective hidden weapons were unable to hit their targets. The group of people couldn't even escape from her hands, let alone resist. "Protect your people, coward." Snaketooth suddenly heard a voice beside his ear, but when he looked around he saw nothing. He swallowed and crawled to Sunflower in a flurry, putting his hand gently on her nose. Her warm breath slowly flowed out. She was still alive. Snaketooth felt a lump in his throat. He could no longer suppress his emotions after surviving a disaster. What was said in the announcement was true. These people were sent by His Royal Highness to eliminate the gang organizers. They all survived. He leaned on Sunflower and burst into tears. As more and more soldiers in brown uniforms rushed into the house, the battle quickly ended. All the living rats were ordered to stand in a line and walk out of the house one by one. My head hurts." Tigerclaw touched his head and said, "It's so swollen." "You're lucky you didn't get beaten to death." Snaketooth glared at him, tears still lingering in his eyes. "What the hell happened?" Sunflower rubbed her neck, where the cyan bruise was clearly visible. "I thought I was going to die. I'll tell you when we get out." Snaketooth shook his head. He was afraid that if he said it now, he would cry again. "Next, it's your turn." The guard at the door twisted his arm behind his back. Snaketooth did not resist and followed the guard out of the door. He saw a woman in a white robe standing outside the yard, just like the other side of the Black God of Massacre. Her face was covered by a hood, and only strands of blonde curls could be seen. "You can go after answering this lady's questions." "Yes," Snaketooth answered honestly. He was completely shocked by the strength shown by this group of people. "Have you ever killed anyone?" Her voice was clear and melodious, as if it came from another world. "What about rape? Robbery?" He suddenly remembered that she was the invisible person who had warned him. "None. That's enough." She nodded. "Go to the square and wait for His Highness to distribute dinner." Snaketooth took 2 steps forward and then stopped. He plucked up his courage and asked, "Are you a witch?" "Yes." He thought he would not get an answer, but the other party gave him an affirmative answer. These people are just Kanaza's subordinates." He bit his lip and said in one breath, "He hasn't come back for 4 days. He must be hiding with Bloody Hand. Bloody Hand is the real leader here. Don't let him go." "Don't worry, they can't escape." The other party chuckled, her tone full of unquestionable confidence. "You mean, the people sent by His Highness to kill the leader of the rats are witches?" Tigerclaw's eyes widened. "Not only witches but also many ordinary people." Snaketooth recounted the bizarre things he had seen. "My previous guess was right. His Highness's territory has accepted the existence of witches. They're just like ordinary people. They can show up in public without any worries, and even fight side by side with everyone." He paused and said excitedly, "If paper was really sent there, she must be living a good life now." "Why, do you still want to see her?" Sunflower curled her lips. "According to what you said, witches are rare talents. You'll only embarrass her if you see her." Snaketooth was speechless. He knew that Sunflower was right. He was just a rat. Even if he could survive the winter, his identity would not change. Paper, on the other hand, had probably lived a completely different life and was no longer on the same level as him. Chapter 466. There were more people coming to get their second meal. Fortunately, the three of them had been waiting in the square and managed to get a place near the front. It was not until he joined the queue that Snaketooth realized why the fences were built around the wooden platform. The speaker on the platform had changed, but he was still talking endlessly about the new policy. Snaketooth probably had to listen to his nagging before he received his oatmeal. The crowd moved forward slowly. After about a quarter of an hour, he finally went around to the back of the wooden platform. "Show me the back of your right hand," the guard said. Snaketooth did as he was told, and the guard pressed a seal on the back of his hand. Next. At this point, the wooden fence expanded to both sides, forming an open area. However, the queue was still not over. Under the guidance of the guards, everyone received their wooden bowls, got their porridge, went to the other end to eat the porridge, and put down the bowls. It was hard to believe that this orderly order was created by ordinary civilians and rats. Snaketooth looked back at the long queue behind him, and could not help but feel a sense of absurdity. It was as if they were not begging for charity, but completing a solemn ceremony. What did he stamp on us? Tigerclaw poked his head out from behind him. I can't erase it. Probably to prevent us from lining up again after we finish our porridge, he said, curling his lips. There were tall tents around the open area. Through the light from the fire, he could see many people busy inside. From time to time, someone carried heavy wooden buckets to the long wooden table by the fence, and the guards distributed them to everyone. Obviously, the food was freshly cooked. When the steaming oatmeal was poured into a bowl, Snaketooth's hands could not help but tremble. How long had it been since he had tasted hot food? The oatmeal was not thick, and there were no vegetables or seasonings, but the white surface and the overflowing aroma were enough to make him salivate. Compared with the black bread mixed with pebbles and chaff, the food in the bowl made him taste the sweetness that he had not tasted for a long time. Oh no, my eyes are getting sore again. Snaketooth finished the bowl of white porridge in a few gulps, and even licked the bottom of the bowl clean. Although he had the urge to run back and ask for another bowl, he gave up the idea when he saw the guards watching over him. Reluctantly, he placed the wooden bowl in the designated basin, and followed the crowd out of the fenced area. There was a wooden stage at the exit, and the speaker was enthusiastically answering the questions of the crowd. With warm food in their stomachs, even the cold wind was not as cold as before. Snaketooth and the other two slowed down and followed the crowd to the wooden platform. You're asking why His Royal Highness is distributing relief rations? That's a good question. Because His Highness is determined to completely eliminate the rats in the fortress. Those who are threatened by the rats and have no choice but to obey them for food can be completely liberated, and will no longer be threatened by them. At the same time, some families who did not have enough food could also use it to tide over their difficulties. This is His Highness' benevolence. But you said that the oatmeal would only be served after the months of demons. What should we do after that? Someone asked loudly. The crowd quieted down. Most of them were waiting for the answer. Snaketooth also pricked up his ears. Very simple. You can support yourselves. The announcer laughed. Feed yourself? I don't know how to farm. Your Excellency, can you explain it more clearly? Don't worry, let me tell you slowly. He waved his hand. After the months of demons, Longsong Stronghold and Border Town will merge into a new city. The land in between needs a large number of workers to reclaim and build. This is how you can support yourselves. Work. Only work can create wealth and change your fate. You'll get a stable salary which can not only support yourselves but also your families. At the same time, His Highness has promised that anyone who has a formal job will be accepted as a citizen of the new city. His words caused a stir in the crowd. Snaketooth felt his heart beating fast. Yes, I know what you're all thinking, the announcer said loudly. There are many rats among you. Or citizens who were forced to become rats. But it doesn't matter. Through labor, you'll get a new life. You won't have to live in the dark underground anymore, and you won't have to worry about being sent to the gallows one day. You can rely on your own hands to exchange for legitimate rewards, whether it's food, clothes, or even a shelter from the wind and rain. Sir, as long as we're willing to work? He nodded with a smile. When the time comes, His Highness will need more than tens of thousands of people, so, yes, as long as we're willing to work. Snaketooth suddenly felt like he understood something. In the next few days, the three of them went to the central square to get oatmeal at noon. More and more citizens heard the news and went there, almost occupying half of the square. Of course, some people didn't come for food, they just wanted to witness the end of the Blackstreet Rats. Almost every day in Stronghold was like a festival. After the oatmeal was served at noon, a trial and execution took place on the other side of the square. Just as the white-robed woman had said, not a single rat could escape their pursuit. Snaketooth saw Kanaz's figure in the trial. His face was pale, and he was trembling slightly while kneeling on the scaffold. He had completely lost his usual arrogant demeanor. Then, with a roar from the iron pipe, his head was smashed. In addition to Kanaz, there were many other big shots whose names he had only heard of. For example, Bloody Hand, Iron Raven Ripper. They were all notorious kings of the Blackstreet. Their performance was not much better than Kanaz's. The death of each Rat King would set off enthusiastic cheers. In the end, the onlookers chanted "Long live His Highness," while watching the criminals being executed. On the fourth day, Snaketooth saw Joe again. He seemed to have completely recovered, and the four of them hugged each other excitedly. "Where have you been these days?" "I don't know." Joe shook his head. "I was in a daze, and when I woke up, I was already lying in a tent. My head didn't hurt anymore. Then I ate and slept until the fever subsided. There were several patients like me, and they even put jerky in their oatmeal. I almost swallowed my tongue the first time. Is there such a good thing?" Tigerclaw widened his eyes. "Damn it, I want to be infected with a cold plague. Anyway, it's good that you survived," Sunflower said happily. After everyone sighed for a while, Snaketooth suddenly said, "When the months of demons are over, I want to find a job. Maybe those nobles are just fooling us, and there may be all kinds of additional requirements." Tigerclaw spread out his hands and said, "You see, they've already started to recruit soldiers and policemen of the Second Army. They're all asking for a fixed address, a clean background, and no criminal record. They're not even allowed to steal. They're not taking us into consideration at all." Snaketooth shook his head and did not answer. The things mentioned in the announcement were becoming reality bit by bit. He realized that the so-called new city of the prince might be far beyond his imagination. In these few short yet long days, he had gradually felt the changes. Chapter 467. Vendi, Scroll, and Spear sat in the hall on the first floor of the castle, sharing top-grade black tea from the City of Glow. Wendy took down the bubbling kettle from the fireplace and poured the boiling well water into the teacup. Watching the water gradually dyed into a transparent orange-red color, and the rich fragrance wafted from the billowing white mist, Wendy felt her whole body become lazy. After blowing away the steam from the teacup, she took a small sip. After the slight bitterness, the sweetness lingered in her mouth. Warmth flowed into her stomach, and she couldn't help but hum in satisfaction. On the other side of the hall, Paper was still competing with the sigil of God's will. She had now mastered the technique of injecting magic power into the sigil, and could control the output of magic power more precisely. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could only light up the first magic stone on the sigil. "Seeing her reminds me of the days in the Witch Cooperation Association," Scroll lamented. "At that time, no one would have thought that we could still live like this. If we could predict it in advance, Kara wouldn't be so stubborn." Vendi put down the teacup. "Fortunately, the awakened sisters don't have to go through the hardships we went through." She paused and smiled. "Perhaps, we're the last batch of witches to suffer. And also the oldest batch, with the shortest time to enjoy the good life." Scroll put her hand on her forehead and said, "It sounds like we've suffered a lot. So you came back so early today, because you wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to enjoy more leisure time?" Wendy joked. "I only left after I finished my official business." The latter shrugged. "His Highness isn't here, so there are fewer things to do. I'm not used to it." "Really?" Wendy raised her eyebrows and said, "When His Highness returns, I will tell him these words without missing a single word." "Well, In the next exam, I can't guarantee that you'll be able to understand every question. You guys have such a good relationship. Spear chuckled. I'm not young anymore, but I don't feel as deeply as you do. I'm probably one of the lucky ones among the witches. Of course, not every witch has a powerful father. Scroll took a sip of tea. Moreover, he will pass everything to his daughter. Even among the nobles, such a person is a minority. By the way, how do you feel about the city hall? Vendi looked at her. I heard that you've been going there whenever you're free. I've benefited a lot. Spear heaved a long sigh. It's the first time I've seen such a well-organized and closely related management method. Compared to letting several ministers handle this matter alone, having the city hall bear the employees' salaries themselves can not only avoid the difficulty of replacing people, but also allow capable civilians to join without any hindrance. I really don't know how His Highness thought of this. She even had a good chat with Barov, Scroll said, covering her mouth. Ahem, he asked me for some advice on the nobles' laws, which I happen to know quite well. Spear shook her head. Also, His Highness' new law is very unique. It might be implemented in Fallen Dragon Ridge in the future, so I couldn't help but discuss it with him for a while. Oh, what's unique about it? For example, the definition of the people. Sister Wendy, when will I be able to light up the second magic stone? Paper came up to them and raised the sigil of God's will, whining. When you're older. She held out her hand to the little girl. Come, let me hug you. Paper grabbed her hand and crawled into her embrace on all fours. Vendi stroked Paper's head. Watching the two of them discuss the new law, she felt a sense of tranquility in her heart. If only this kind of life could last forever. Just then, a guard walked into the hall. He looked around for a while, then hesitantly walked toward the four of them. What happened? Vendi recognized him. He was one of His Highness' personal guards. Lady Vendi, a townsfolk has arrived outside the castle. She claims that her daughter has just awakened as a witch. He put his hand on his chest and bowed. His Highness has instructed me to let you handle this matter if he's not here. What? The three of them were stunned. A newly awakened witch? That's what she said. Take me to her, Vendi said immediately. At the gate of the castle district, she saw two townspeople waiting in the cold wind. One of them was about 40 years old. His hair was half white, and the wrinkles on his forehead were deep and long. He was wearing an old coat, and his body was slightly hunched. The other was much younger, about 17 or 18 years old. He stood next to the old woman with a cautious expression. This is Lady Vendi of the Witch Union, the guard introduced. My lady. Hello. The two of them bowed respectfully. They said that they were immigrants from the Southern Territory. They moved into the inner city a month and a half ago. I've also checked their IDs, and they basically matched the information on them. Are you a witch? Vendi looked at the young woman and asked in the softest possible tone. What's your name? My lady is asking you a question. The woman pulled at her sleeve. Summer, the latter said in a low voice. Are you her mother? Yes. Her father is still working in the furnace district, so I sent her here first. The woman nodded. My lady, may I ask what His Highness said on the notice? Is it true that witches are paid a golden dragon every month? Yes, if she's willing to join the Witch Union. Summer opened her mouth. She's willing. Of course, she's willing to dedicate everything to His Highness. The mother interrupted her daughter. Do we need to sign a contract? When can we get the money? Vendi could not help but frown at the woman's words. From her tone, it was not difficult to tell that the woman obviously regarded her daughter as a commodity for sale, and even more so, regarded the Witch Union as a place for His Highness to amuse himself. She suppressed the displeasure in her heart and replied calmly, His Highness is now dealing with government affairs in Longsong Stronghold, and I don't know when he will come back. In addition, before joining the Union, you need to go through a review and test. You can leave your daughter in the castle and wait for His Highness to return to Border Town before signing the contract. After all, no matter what, Summer was innocent, and she did not want to spread her anger towards the ignorant to the innocent. Although most of the natives of Border Town had accepted witches, The refugees who came to the western region after the months of demons still had a deep misunderstanding about witches. Then I'll leave it to you, my lady. The woman bowed again and patted her daughter's head. Behave well, and don't let His Highness down. Chapter 468. Genius in a Second to Remember Love? Shuanet, providing you with wonderful novel reading. Summer, right? Don't worry. Vendi stepped forward and took her hand. The witch union isn't what your family thinks. You don't have to stay in the castle. Really? She asked in a low voice. Of course it's true, Wendy said with a smile. We live in the castle because we have no other place to go. Before His Royal Highness took us in, all witches lived like street children. Their families were either broken, or they treated their sisters as strangers. So you still have a family of your own. You can already be considered a lucky person. She paused. Let's go, it's very windy here. Okay. The girl lowered her head and followed her into the castle. Is this the newly awakened witch? Scroll had been waiting at the door. What's her name? Summer. Vendi looked at the guard. Can you help me inform Ms. Agatha and ask her to go back to the castle? Tell her there's a new witch in town. She should be in the chemistry lab by the river. It's my pleasure. The guard saluted and left. Indeed. Without Nightingale and Sylvie, only Agatha can distinguish the type and size of magic power. Scroll nodded. What's her ability? I don't know yet. Vendi touched her head. How old are you this year? 10. Summer became nervous again, probably because there were a few strangers in front of her. 18 years old. Spear was surprised. Isn't that an adult? When did you find out you were awakened as a witch? Scroll asked. Tell us the details. Just 3 days ago, on the night of my coming of age, Asia replied in a soft voice. My brother caught a fish from the river and wanted to give it to me, but it was snatched away by my second sister. In the end, only half of the tail was left for me. I hugged the quilt and cried all night. I even dreamed that the fish returned to the bowl. When I woke up, I found that the fish was still there, and I had an older sister. Another older sister? What do you mean? Vendi asked in surprise. One was sitting at the table eating fish, and the other was paralyzed with fear. But soon both the fish and the second sister disappeared. Xia recalled. I could feel at that time. Those extra things should have something to do with me. However, when I told them about it, my father beat me up. He said that I shouldn't have scared my second sister. I really didn't mean to scare her. Who knew that a dream would come true? That wasn't a dream, Vendi affirmed. It was a call to awaken. When magic gathered in a witch's body, it was also the so-called Day of Awakening. During this process, witches could not only feel the changes in their bodies, but also because most people were unable to suppress the strange magic, it would lead to the spontaneous use of their abilities. Therefore, in the past, apart from the extremely difficult day of adulthood, the second reason for the loss of witches was the Day of Awakening. Everyone knew what would happen if they unconsciously displayed the strange effects of magic in public. However, Vendi had never seen the Day of Awakening and the Day of Adulthood coinciding. Of course, it was not impossible, because the Day of Adulthood itself was a relatively special Day of Awakening. Later, my second sister said that I was a witch and couldn't stay at home anymore. My brother said that it didn't matter if I was a witch, since there were so many witches in the town. My family quarreled over this. Xia's voice became lower and lower. Finally, they decided to send me here. It seemed that even the people who had just arrived in the Southern Territory had begun to be influenced by the town's propaganda. Fortunately, she would not be tied up and handed over to the church like many of her sisters. Unfortunately, her family had never been able to fully accept a witch. However, Vendi believed that this kind of thing would slowly change over time. The town's natives were the best example. After she continued to ask about some details, Agatha walked into the hall, looking travel-worn. Is this the new witch in the town? Vendi nodded and briefly described Summer's identity and awakening experience. How does the Union test a witch's ability? It's generally divided into two parts. After listening to Summer, Agatha took out a magic stone from her waist pocket. One part is to observe the specific performance of the ability, and the other part is to use the stone of measuring to measure the comprehensive level of magic power. Then she looked at Summer and said, "Close your eyes and feel the magic power running in your body." "Do we need her to cooperate?" Vendi asked worriedly. "She just became a witch 3 days ago, so I'm afraid she knows nothing about magic power." "No need." Agatha laughed in a low voice. "I'm just worried that she'll be afraid." As she spoke, the stone filled with magic power bloomed with a pale green light and enveloped Summer. A cloud of mist gradually appeared on her chest, the center of which was pale yellow and looked as if it would dissipate at any time. She didn't lie. After observing for a moment, Agatha stopped the operation of the magic stone. It's indeed a characteristic that the day of awakening and the day of adulthood happen on the same day. The type of ability is magic power, which is the summoning type that you're familiar with. The level of magic power is extremely low. Extremely low. Vendi was startled. Has such a coincidence ever happened in Tequila? The Union has witnessed the awakening of thousands of witches, so this kind of thing is not rare, Agatha said with a little pride. For witches who awaken at the end of adulthood, it's equivalent to not having the day of adulthood. What? Their magic power can't form a cyclone, so they remain in the state before adulthood. Naturally, they won't have the branching ability and stable enhancement unique to adulthood. I don't know whether such witches can have a higher awakening, but if they can't go further, the problem of magic power will plague them for the rest of their lives. At this point she paused. Let's take a look at Summer's ability first. After all, the amount of magic power is only one aspect. The ability itself is what determines a witch's value. Agatha. Vendi frowned. All witches should be like sisters who share a brotherly bond, instead of measuring each other's value by ability. That's how it is in the Holy City. Agatha was not moved at all. Of course. I also believe in His Highness's words. Every ability has its own unique use, but there are still differences between them. What are you arguing about? Summer opened her eyes, looking confused. Nothing. Vendi reluctantly smiled at her and comforted her. Try to show us your ability first. The little girl held her breath and slowly stretched out her hands. Soon, the four of them saw the changes. Vendi, Scroll, and Spear reappeared by the tea table in the hall. Although the latter two were talking, they couldn't hear anything. Paper, who had left the hall a long time ago, appeared by Vendi's side again. She slowly climbed into her arms, revealing a sweet smile. Chapter 469. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. When the illusion disappeared, the hall fell into a strange silence. After a long time, Scroll heaved a sigh of relief and said, "No wonder your second sister was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Such a scene is indeed a little terrifying. The ability to produce group illusions is quite rare, but it's not impossible." Agatha said slowly, "When I was in the Union, I knew at least 2 people who had similar abilities, and one of them was a senior witch in Starfall City. How many times can you use this ability every day?" Vendi asked. "Can you control the specific time when the illusion appears?" According to His Royal Highness habit, the next step should be to test all aspects of the ability to understand its characteristics, consumption, and use. "Probably 2 or 3 times, Summer replied in a low voice. "What's the time period? Do you mean how long ago you can see?" Seeing the former nod, she scratched her head in embarrassment. "I haven't tried it either, but the further I go, the harder it gets." Vendi couldn't help but laugh. "That's not strenuous. You're consuming the magic power in your body. Mana. You should be able to feel it. It's like water flowing in your body, or like a swirling fog. Every time you use your ability, you need to use it," Scroll explained. "There are many other characteristics of magic power. We will slowly teach you later." Summer nodded slightly. Then Vendi asked her to use all her strength to cast another illusion. This time, the result showed that it was about a day and a half ago. She could see that the hall was already lit up, and the sisters of the Witch Union were sitting at the long table enjoying their dinner. After that, Summer's magic power was completely exhausted. The girl lowered her arms, panting, and fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Vendi recorded the results of the 2 tests in her notebook. As for the purpose, she couldn't think of it at the moment. After all, the illusion could only show what had happened in the past, and it couldn't predict the future. Perhaps she could only wait for His Highness Roland to come back, before she could make a judgment. Thinking of this, she could not help but feel a little depressed. His Royal Highness had once revealed to her that he intended to turn the Witch Union into a self-operating organization, with her as the leader. But she wasn't as knowledgeable and experienced as His Highness, so she couldn't consider the application of her sister's abilities as thoroughly as he could. Calming herself down, Vendi was about to say a few words of encouragement when Scroll gestured at her. As they walked to the side, she asked softly, "What's wrong? Are you going to tell Summer that it's okay to stay here if she doesn't want to go home?" Scroll frowned. "Have you forgotten the examination before joining the Witch Union?" Vendi, of course, knew that foreign witches had to answer 10 general questions about their identity and origins under Nightingale's lie detection ability, before they could be regarded as one of the same kind. But it's unlikely that Summer is a fake. Her ID card was made by Soroya, and her origins are all right. What's more, she has just awakened and is still a non-combat witch. Even the church can't predict this kind of situation. Magic power isn't the only thing that can hurt people. A dagger or a bag of poison can have the same effect, or even better. No, how could she? But you can't deny this possibility, Scroll interrupted. City Hall is responsible for the check-in, so they won't check every family member. At this time, the sudden awakening became the best opportunity to sneak into the castle. She paused. Of course, I know that such a possibility is very small, but don't forget that we can't afford to lose His Highness Roland. Besides, Her Highness Tilly is also living in the Witch Building. If anything happens to her, I'm afraid that the Sisters of Sleeping Island will completely break off their relationship with Border Town, and everything His Highness has done will go down the drain. We can't afford such a price. Vendi fell silent. She knew that Scroll's worry was not unreasonable, and it was not aimed at Summer personally, but she still found it hard to accept. Summer was the first witch to awaken in Border Town after Roland became the Lord, but she was regarded as a potential enemy. This contrast was really uncomfortable. After a long time she said, "I know. I'll send her back." "I'll accompany you to send her off," Scroll sighed. After leaving the castle, the girl suddenly became much more lively. She began to take Vendi's hand and ask more about witches and the Lord. "What's wrong?" Vendi asked casually after satisfying her curiosity. "You seem to be very happy that you don't have to live in the castle." Summer choked and then lowered her head in embarrassment. "I heard that the Lord, that is, His Highness, is a very terrible person. He tortures the women around him many times every day." Pfft. Vendi almost choked on her saliva. "Where did you hear that? Isn't he the 4th Prince of Grey Castle? I've heard of him many times in Eagle City. There are even ballads about him. The 2nd Prince is insidious and despicable, the 4th Prince is greedy and lustful, and only the 3rd Princess of the Port of Clearwater is a truly good king," Summer whispered. "I see," Scroll said with great interest. "This is probably Garcia's way of advertising. It's quite unique. Isn't he that kind of person?" Of course not," Vendi said with a flushed face. "You'll know in the future that he's the most trustworthy lord for witches." After arriving at the residential area where Summer's family lived, the 3 of them walked up to a 2-story building and knocked on the door of her house. It was Summer's mother who opened the door. "Mom, I'm back," Summer shouted happily. "Why are you?" She was startled and looked at the 2 people behind her daughter, looking a little flustered. "Did she do something wrong? Don't you want her anymore?" "His Highness hasn't come back yet, so she can live in the castle and wait for His Highness to come back," the woman said eagerly. "Summer is very obedient. Although she's a little slow, she's willing to do anything." "Madam," The witch union isn't what you think it is. Vendi felt a burst of anger in her heart. Before she could finish her sentence, Scroll stopped her. The latter took out a golden dragon from her waist pocket and waved it in front of Summer's face. Your daughter is indeed a daughter. When His Highness comes back, you can sign a contract with her. This is the payment for the first month. Keep it well. Yes, yes. The woman's attention immediately shifted to the golden coin. Thank you, Your Excellency. Remember, you're now taking care of her on behalf of His Highness. Do you understand? Yes, Your Excellency. I'll take good care of Summer. After leaving the residential area, Vendi could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. Why did you give the payment to that kind of person? Even if you give it to her in advance, it's what she deserves. Can Summer keep that golden dragon? Scroll's answer startled Vendi. If she can't keep it, it'll fall into the hands of her family sooner or later. If she can keep it, it'll be even worse. I'm afraid those people will completely regard her as an outsider. On the contrary, if she directly gives it to her mother, not only will Summer not feel burdened, they may even treat her better. There's still a long way to go. If this golden dragon can be exchanged for a more comfortable living environment, it might be a good deal. She thought for a moment and then said, You're right. I was too naive. The successive setbacks made Vendi very depressed. She thought with some sadness that maybe she was not the right person to lead the witch union. Chapter 470. Half a month later, Roland finally set foot on his way back. After Thunder had wiped out the 4 big families and the Black Street Rats, Longsong's stronghold had temporarily become a blank piece of paper that he could do whatever he wanted. All the relief and resettlement measures were carried out in an orderly manner. Although the Golden Dragon and food found in the territories of Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose were not as abundant as those found in Duke Ryan's territory, they were still an amazing amount of income. Because of this, he could expand the scope of relief food to all the people in the city, and use the porridge distribution time to publicize the policy. The effect was remarkable. On the day of his departure, the Second Army had recruited the planned 500 people, and the police department also had a new team of about 200 people. Roland left half of the soldiers and Vader in Longsong's stronghold. Apart from the daily defense and vigilance, he also wanted to train these new soldiers into useful soldiers as soon as possible. He knew that this blank period would not last long. If he did not quickly establish a direct connection between the people and City Hall, and penetrate his power into the grassroots, the decadent and old-fashioned order would come back and fill the power vacuum. Without destruction, there can be no construction. He had already completed the goal of destruction, and the next step was the stage of construction. What gave Roland confidence was the solid support of Border Town. The total population had increased to more than 30,000, and more than half of the population was receiving basic education. In the future, it would only be the size of 2 middle schools, but in this era, it was an extremely amazing scale. The education that was popularized to every citizen was not only about literacy, but also basic natural knowledge, political thinking, and instilled with national consciousness. The improvement of their cultural level would allow them to have enough people at the grassroots level to push for change. Compared to the ignorant people who did not know why they were fighting and were resigned to suffering, the awakening of their national consciousness would allow them to explode with unimaginable power. The citizens of Border Town were the seeds that he had sown. One day, they would set off a prairie fire on this continent. As the sky gradually darkened, the vague outline of the town appeared in front of Roland. Look! What's that? A noble behind him exclaimed. A bridge? Another man craned his neck to look. My God, it's too long. That's impossible. There are only 2 pillars. How can they support such a long bridge? Wait. It looks like it's made of iron. On the way back, in addition to the witches, Roland's ship also had dozens of nobles on board. They were either from poor families or had low titles, so they kept a respectful distance from the rebellion. Therefore, they were able to escape his purge. According to the plan, they would learn the hierarchical management method of the city hall in Border Town. When the city was officially built, They would return to the fortress and assist Perrault in building the low-level city hall. They would then execute and give feedback to the orders that they issued. After losing the privileges of the noble fiefdoms, these people could only rely on their own abilities if they wanted to advance further. When the fleet crossed the silver-edged steel bridge, Roland heard the nobles behind him gasp in surprise. The group of people couldn't help but hold their breath, silently watching the iron bridge across the river pass over their heads. The prince could not help but feel a little funny. This group of people had never stopped exclaiming since they boarded the ship. At first, they were surprised that the ship made of stone could float on the water. Then they were very curious about the rotating wheel and the steam engine that spewed out white fog. Unfortunately, the 3 supplies project in Border Town hasn't been completed yet, he thought maliciously. Otherwise, when these people see the bright and stable light, their eyeballs will definitely pop out. With a long whistle, the ship slowly docked next to the dock. Barav, Carter, and a large group of City Hall officials, who had long received the pigeon message, had been waiting on the shore for a long time. When they saw Roland, they even sounded the bell and performed a welcoming ceremony according to the etiquette of welcoming the king. Roland smiled and patted their shoulders. Then he took Barav to the nobles of Stronghold and introduced them to each other. "I'll leave the accommodation, life and study of these people to you," he whispered in the chief's ear. "Don't worry about their identity and titles. At most, they're just barren. There are all kinds of people in the mine, but they still have to work honestly. Train them in the same way as the new graduates. I want to see the results as soon as possible." "Yes, Your Highness." When he returned to the castle, the witches who had heard the news had already gathered in the hall. Roland had just stepped through the door, but before he could feel the warmth that he hadn't felt for a long time, a warm body had already thrown itself into his chest. Smelling the familiar fragrance coming from her hair, he smiled and touched the other's head. "I'm back." "Well," Anna raised her head, her lake blue eyes rippling. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." "Me too." "And me too." Soon Roland felt an extra weight on both sides of his arms. He didn't have to look to know that besides Lightning and Maggie, no other witches would disturb him and Anna at this time. "Hey, you're just following him, okay?" Mystery Moon shouted. "That's right," Lily snorted. "Shameless." "It's good that you all came back safely," Vendi said softly with a smile. "We should have a good celebration tonight," Scroll suggested. "Oh, I want ice cream bread." Andrea cheered. "With ashes and chavies, I want to eat a big plate." The last one to come forward was Tilly Wimbledon. She held out her hand and said with a relaxed expression, "You've worked hard." "Thank you." Roland raised the corner of his mouth and took the hand offered by the other party. After the sumptuous dinner, Roland returned to his office and let out a long sigh. Although the castle in Stronghold was much larger, he still felt more comfortable in this small place. Just as he was about to tidy up the books that had been transported from Stronghold, Anna opened the door and walked in. "You came just in time." Roland pointed to the books piled on the carpet. "Look, these are the gifts I brought for you." Most of them were historical records and legends, and some of the secrets of the Western region. They were all taken from the Duke's study. "By the way, this book is..." Before he finished speaking, he felt a pair of soft lips press against his. There was a slight heat in the fragrance, and there was a moist smell in the dry air. After they separated, Anna calmly looked into his eyes and said word by word, "I missed you so much." Looking at the ripples in her eyes, Roland felt a surge of warmth in his heart. "This book. I can read it later." "I think so." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.